Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube, and it is Mock Draft Monday. Happy Mock Draft Monday to everybody. Today we're going to try a 2-round mock draft, but before you say, hey, this is going to be a 12-hour show, first round's already done. We're going to steal Eric Edholm's first round, use that as a base, and then build on it with the whole round 2 discussion. The people are asking for this. So welcome in. Let's have a great Monday. How you doing, Sam?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah, it's a new way of trying this. I haven't really seen too many, if anybody, attempt this. Number one, required because of the amount of time we would take to do a 2-hour mock draft if we didn't do this. But number two, I think it's good because like when people are looking for 2-round mock drafts, you're kind of looking for the second round stuff anyway, right? Like there's a million first round mocks out there. So let's do the first round. Let's get that done. And then let's get into the interesting discussions in the second round.
So let's get to some of my prefaces that I'll repeat for the next 2 hours plus. The second round is where things diverge, right? Like, you know, when you see a first round mock and things diverge at pick 5 or pick 6, you get this worst mock ever. But once you get into the second round, it's like, oh, look at this guy. I thought was going in the third. He went at 48. You know, this guy who was rumored to go on day 3, look at that. He's at 42 now. So these things can go any which way. You start to get more need-based picks, I think, in the second round, fill in specific needs on the roster. So that's part of it's all a thought exercise, Sam. So like we said, we wanted to use a first round mock draft as a base and a foundation.
Yeah. And we were looking for one because of the sort of recent buzz of, you know, you go around searching Dane Brugler, Greg Cosell. All of a sudden, there's a lot of people now talking about Shedeur Sanders as being this sort of marginal first round / second round talent. Now, that doesn't always correspond to where these guys are going to get drafted, right? So it's not necessarily one-to-one that because they see him as a fringe first-round talent, he won't go in the top 5. But there is a sort of growing buzz recently that Shedeur gets passed on at the top of this draft at number 2 or number 3. And we've been speculating, well, if that happens, where does he slide to? So we wanted to find a mock draft where that slide had started, right? Where they didn't draft Shedeur Sanders at number 2 or number 3. And that shakes up the first round a little bit. So that was why we went with Eric Edholm's one in particular.
Plus, we like Eric, friend of the show.
Yeah,
I don't even know if he's been on the show.
Don't think so.
No, we'll have him at some point, but he's a friend generally off air.
Before we get started, we got 2 things to clear up.
Yeah.
Just housekeeping. Number one, what mug are you going with today? I'm going with the old favorite. Check
Big
the mug.
Surprise here. The Yeti. The
right,
old
so as standard.
Really quick, someone asked if I wash. I do wash this daily. It isn't just like keep the stale coffee in there. I know some people believe you always keep the stale coffee in there, and it's it's better for you.
What?
Old people, but I do wash it daily. But yeah, it's my go-to. I'm back.
And number 2, Facebook informs me it's your birthday today.
It is.
Happy birthday, Stephen.
Thank you. And
now you're always, way older than me again.
Way older, at least a whole year older than you. Big 43 today, as is my wife. I always have to give a shout out to Kelly. It is her birthday as well. We were born on the same exact day in the world.
So there we go. Everybody drop Steve a happy birthday in the comments. That's great. I'm sure that's great for the algorithm.
Happy 60th, man. Somebody ban Ben from the Check the Mic account here. Really quick, the last housekeeping item, I swear. We do, speaking of Check the Mic handles and such, we actually finally have a Twitter handle. Like it's 2012. We're unleashing a new Twitter handle, CTM_show. So make sure you follow that just to help consolidate all of Check the Mic's unique takes. So Check the Mic, new Twitter handle. I retweeted it. You retweeted it, I believe. And go check it out. So I appreciate it. Happy 21st. Man, what the heck? 21st? Back in 03, I remember that. Crazy. A lot different than 43. Anyway, we're just trying to get through here. The kids might break in and sing happy birthday at some point. Who the heck knows? All right, here we go. Let's go. Eric Edholm from NFL.com. Let's take a look at his first-round mock. We're using this as a foundation here, Sam. So as you might, Cam Ward at the top. Abdul Carter goes number 2 to the Browns. We'll see where Shedeur Sanders slides. Anything from this top 8 that stands out to you worth noting?
Yeah. The most surprising pick of maybe the first round, but certainly of this top 8 is Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State, going at number 5 to the Jags. You've been railing against me trying to stuff him into the top 10, getting him to the Jets at 7. And here a pick that I've literally never even considered. What if the Jags selected Tyler Warren at 5 to replace Evan Ingram? I mean, that's pretty wild.
I'll say this. I dove into more Tyler Warren tape again last week. I'm closer to him being later in the first round than close to the top 10 after watching him. I still I still think he's a good player. I cannot justify Tyler Warren in the top 10. So yeah, that would be an interesting pick. I'm lower on both tight ends. I think they're both closer. I think Tyler Warren's closer to Kyle Rudolph than he is Brock Bowers. Let that one sink in. And I think Colston Loveland's a fine player, but I think they're both more like a David Njoku level first round tight end, back end of the first, than TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers level of tight end prospect who go, in the top 10. So, or, Brock Bowers goes in the top 10 in any other year where there's not 6 QBs in the top 12. So, yeah, that's just where I am on Warren. But yeah, I mean, I'd be fascinated to see him with Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence. The Ashton Genty pick to the Raiders, another one I thought might be more common than we've seen. And the Panthers always choose a pass rusher. This time it's Mykel Williams from Georgia, the pass rusher of choice for Eric Edholm's mock draft here. Again, this is Eric Edholm from NFL.com, not us. And we're just using this as a foundation. We'll build a second round off of this one.
Yeah, well, because of a couple of those strange picks, like non-conventional so far, non-chalky picks, the nobody picking Shador and Tyler Warren at 5. From that point on, all of a sudden you start to get some unusual combinations, like Mason Graham going to the Jets at 7, and then the cascading kind of defensive linemen going to various different spots. So, all of a sudden Will Campbell drops to number 10 for Chicago. That would feel like a steal, I think, for the Bears if you get to draft night. Now, where exactly he plays in that offense would be interesting, given all the moves that they've made so far in free agency. Like, does he have to unseat Braxton Jones at left tackle? Does he just come in as a depth guy, or does he immediately play right guard and you don't have to worry about the health of Jonah Jackson anymore? Like, that would be an interesting move for Will Campbell, but I think it would be a steal.
Yeah, I mean, Dane Brugler repeated today, like others have said, most of the teams he's talked to have Will Campbell as a tackle. And so we've spent enough time assuming this move to guard, and maybe that thought's archaic. And plus the fact that he came in at 33 inches at his pro day as far as arm length goes. So maybe it's like, it's okay. Box ticked. We're good. So I do have a feeling, by the way, Amon Membu went number 4 to the New England Patriots. I do have a feeling that we are more likely looking at Will Campbell there if Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are off the board. And of course, in this graphic here, the most notable thing is at pick 15, the Falcons have traded down. The Cleveland Browns have traded back into the first round to get Shedeur Sanders. So in this mock draft, Abdul Carter at 2 to the Browns. Then they trade back up to 15. The Falcons now have pick 33, first pick of the second round, of which we will go through.
Yeah, let me, just for the benefit of anyone listening rather than watching, let me run through this pick by pick quickly. The recap of the top 10. Cam Ward going number 1 overall to Tennessee. Abdul Carter, the edge rusher, going number 2 overall to the Browns. The Giants select Travis Hunter, cornerback from Colorado. The Patriots select Armand Membu, offensive tackle from Missouri. At 5, the Jags take Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State. At 6, the Raiders select Ashton Genty, running back from Boise State. At 7, the Jets select Mason Graham, defensive tackle from Michigan. At 8, the Panthers select Mykel Williams, edge rusher from Georgia. At 9, the New Orleans Saints select Shamar Stewart, edge rusher from Texas A&M. At 10, the Bears select Will Campbell, offensive tackle, apparently, from LSU. At 11, the Patriots. At 11, the 49ers select Jalen Walker, edge rusher from Georgia. At 12, the Dallas Cowboys select Omarion Hampton, running back from North Carolina. At 13, the Dolphins select Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan. 14, the Colts, Colston Loveland from Michigan. 15 is that trade that Steve just talked about. The Browns jumping back up for, what was it, a second, third, and a fourth, or a second and fourth, or whatever it was. Trading back up to 15 to grab Shedeur Sanders, quarterback from Colorado. And then 16, the Cardinals select Jahdae Barron, cornerback from Texas.
Excellent. So we're halfway through the first round. Eric Edholm using his first round mock as a foundation. I mean, it really doesn't matter who we picked to be honest. Like we're gonna play off of it in the second round. Hey, they already got their quarterback. Hey, they already got this guy or that guy. Well, let's see if they change their strategy in the second one. The biggest thing is there's 32 players off the board, and then we take the remaining players and go through the thought exercise in round
But
two.
The reason in particular that I wanted to use one that had Shedeur falling outside of those top 5 picks is because obviously some of the most interesting picks in the second round are at the top of that second round, right? And if each one of those quarterbacks or if each one of those teams rather just grab the guy at 2 or at 3, it makes that less interesting. I think him sliding and then you getting that dynamic of what are the teams at the top of the second round doing, I think becomes pretty interesting.
All right, let's get into the next group here. I'll read through this group. Pick 17 is Mike Green from Marshall going to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Seahawks at 18 get their guard, Tyler Booker from Alabama. The Bucs at number 19 take Jihad Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama. The Broncos, I love this one, Patriots McMillan at number 20 from Arizona, the wide receiver. Steelers with a throwback pick. Love this. Kenneth Grant out of Michigan, the nose tackle going to Pittsburgh. Chargers take Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College at pick 22. Pick 23 is the Packers. They take Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas. And then Edholm here has 2 different trades remaining. The first one, of course, was that Browns-Falcons one. The next trade is the Eagles trading up to pick 24 to take Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia. That moved the Vikings back down to pick 32. There'll be another trade a little bit later on. A couple more chalky type of picks here. Mike Green to the Bengals, Jihad Campbell to the Bucs. We're seeing those more common. And then the McMillan slide, which we've heard more and more about. Again, I think if he goes beyond 15, I think we're going to feel like that's a steal, especially going to a team like Denver at 20. I kind of like that for the Broncos.
Yeah, some interesting picks in this group. Matthew Golden going to the Packers. That's an intriguing one because I don't know if he solves that sort of missing number 1, quote unquote, thing, or if he's just adding one more talented but not necessarily number 1 receiver to that receiving core that's stuffed full of them. I love that Jihad Campbell and Tetero McMillan picks that are starting to become fairly common there in 1920. I love both those picks still. Kenneth Grant going to the Steelers would be amazing. That would be an incredible addition to them. And then the classic interesting one, Tyler Booker going 18 to the Seahawks, who don't take interior offensive linemen in the first round. I mean, they need one, but will they take one?
Yeah. And just to answer some of the questions from the chat as we run through Eric Edholm's first round here, why would we not use our own first round mock? I like to take because some of our biases end up in the first round. I like that we're going to react. Like there's some players available in the second round who would never be available in a first round mock that we would do. So I would rather react to what's already happened somewhere else and then make our own second round picks. And you and I are going to work together going team by team in the second round to make those selections. I like being surprised a little bit here, you know?
Well, the one thing we know will happen on draft night is that whatever you think will happen won't happen, right? Like the chalkiest mock you can come up with will be dead ass wrong on draft night. So you might as well use one that looks a little bit weird because that's got just as much of a chance of coming true as anything else. And like, it's not like, and this could happen, but it's not like anything in this mock that's seen as a quote unquote reach or, wildly unlikely is, like some guy ranked 89 on the consensus board going in the first round. Like this is relatively chalky in terms of where these guys are all ranked on the consensus board. It's just done in an unusual way that we haven't seen too many times. And again, if those 2 teams at the top of this draft pass on Shedeur Sanders, all of a sudden that's very quickly what starts to happen in any mock draft because almost all of them have him going pretty high.
All right, let's wrap up Eric Edholm's first round mock here. Pick 25 is Kelvin Banks, the tackle from Texas, going to the Houston Texans. The third trade here. Now we've got the Kansas City Chiefs trading up to number 26 to get Derek Harmon, defensive lineman out of Oregon. Harmon, big, long defensive tackle who gets some Chris Jones comps. So interesting pick there. So the Chiefs come up to 26 to get Harmon. The Ravens go with Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State at 27. At 28, the Lions take Gray Zabel, guard/center coming out of North Dakota State, probably going to play guard for them. Washington Commanders. This is maybe one of the more surprising picks of the first round. Landon Jackson, the edge rusher out of Arkansas. Remember, had that monster vertical jump at the combine. He had been getting some first round buzz somewhere. Again, not surprising to see names that aren't, always in first round mocks going in the first round, because that happens in real life. At 30, the Bills take Azariah Thomas, the cornerback out of Florida State. And then the two teams that traded down, the Rams are now at 31. They take Nicky Minwari, the safety out of South Carolina. And the Vikings are now at pick 32. They take cornerback Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky.
I love Landon Jackson going in the first round. When you look at the workout that guy had, paired with the fact that there's a question with like James Pierce Jr., for example, like most of his sort of elite production came against non-elite players. Almost the opposite is true of Landon Jackson. Like he gave the best players that he faced some of the worst reps and plays that they have come against Landon Jackson. It's almost like he saved his best play for the best player. So you pair that with elite measurables and workout numbers. I kind of surprised that we haven't seen more of him sneaking consistently into the first round. That's kind of reserved for guys like Donovan Ezeraku and, players like that are the sort of, he could get into the first round. I don't know if I've seen Landon Jackson in the first round yet, but I love that as a pairing.
Yeah. And, I feel like we repeat ourselves a lot, but, we have to remind ourselves that Cole Strange went in the first round. Michael Penix Jr. went at 8 to the Falcons. A guy like Xavier Legette could have been anywhere from the late first into the third round, depending on how much you valued him as a receiver. He goes pick 32 last year to the Carolina Panthers. Anything can happen on draft night, and appreciate our friend Eric Edholm putting this mock draft out into the ether, and we're going to steal it as a foundation to build a second round mock off of that. So we have you running the show here in the mock draft simulator from PFF, and you've put in the first round, right? And we'll have the second round starting now.
Yeah.
So
that means I'm going to be looking to the right of my screen the whole time.
And again, same. I'm looking. I got all my information here on the right. I'm not ignoring the people. I'm not ignoring the camera. We're having some fun here. Best players available on the board. By the consensus board, it's James Pierce, the edge rusher out of Tennessee. Luther Burden the third. We just did our wide receiver rankings last week. We both liked him. Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. All of these players are still available. That the buzz between Thursday and into Friday is like one of my favorite days of the year, when you wake up and you start to look at the second round board and it's like, look, 4, 5, 6 of these players were in several first round mock drafts over the last few months, and they're still available. Some team's going to feel like, or literally come away with guys that they had 2 first round grades on. They're going to feel great coming out of round 2. So there's some good players available here at the beginning of the second round.
Yeah, and so this one's a really interesting one because Atlanta trades out essentially of the first round to get the haul from Cleveland. They let the Browns come up, take Shedeur Sanders in the middle of the first round. They end up with that coveted pick, 33 overall, which will leave a bunch of trade offers on the table. Like I would imagine there'll be a bunch of calls overnight for the Falcons in this scenario. Teams will be trying to get to 33, but they've done the same thing again, right? They've passed up defensive line additions in order to keep assembling more draft picks and moving back. Now, they kind of needed to, right? They didn't have a ton of draft picks. They're there with the Vikings in terms of teams that have traded away a bunch of stuff. So do they, first and foremost, do they answer those calls, or do they use this pick and grab the defensive lineman because they still haven't really addressed that need yet?
I mean, I think you answer the calls. The Falcons are coming into the draft with 4 or 5 picks. And they have several needs, in part because you've got the Kirk Cousins contract. That's going to hurt your cap for a little bit. You couldn't handle some of your needs in free agency. I think this is, I use the word thought exercise a lot, but let's think about this. How the Falcons traded down from 15. If the Falcons at 15 had taken Walter Nolan or James Pierce, you would just say, yeah, of course, those guys are in play at 15. And, this is one person's interpretation of the draft, but right now James Pierce and Walter Nolan are still there at 33, and you get the extra picks that the Falcons would have gotten from the Browns. I think you make the pick here and you fill one of those massive needs, which is interior pass rusher or edge rusher, whether it's Pierce, whether it's Nolan. But remember, this is why over time trading down is extremely important and generally good if you can do it. The player that the Falcons easily could have taken at 15 is still available at 33. At least a couple of them are.
And in terms of teams that would be calling to trade up to get 33, number one, like the first sort of target for that is quarterback. Shadur Sanders went in the middle of the first round. Jackson Dart would be the next guy up. You've got to wonder, would any of these teams feel the need to get to 33 to pick Jackson Dart? And then the second question would be like, which of their sort of players that fell out of the first round would be a potential target for teams trying to get to the top of the second? Is Luther Burden, worth trying to get to 33 to secure for a team? Walter Nolan, I think, would be a guy that has an argument for that. Ibuka, a lot of people love as a first-round player as well. James Pierce, though it's all the guys really at the top of the PFF board. It's this group of four, I think, that would be targets for anybody.
I would look at New England at 38, maybe, if they feel like, if they could go get Luther Burden and actually go Missouri, if they came away with Armand Membu and Luther Burden and they came up to 33 to get Burden, they'd feel pretty good about that, right? We have our tackle and we have a receiver to go with Stephon Diggs. There's a team that could do it.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. But I think for Atlanta, to me, the value of Walter Nolan is too good to turn down at this spot. Like, I'll listen to the calls, but unless somebody's offering a crazy trade package, I'm just picking at 33.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Oh, by the way, Eric did give in his mock draft the bonus pick of 33 being Walter Nolan. We didn't replicate that, officially, but it's certainly in play and something I think obviously you and I would consider here.
It's true. Like, I expected, maybe we go a different way, but when you look at it, actually, that is probably the most sensible pick they can make.
It'd be him or Pierce for me. I mean, I think that's the clear option. I'm good with Nolan if you want to go that way for the Falcons here at 33. Remember, they traded down from 15 with the Cleveland Browns here.
Yeah, I think they have a more acute need on the edge, but I think you probably feel better about Walter Nolan as a player at this point than James Pierce. So I think that's the pick.
Yep, I'm good with that. Let's do it. First pick of the second round, Atlanta Falcons at pick 33. They take Walter Nolan, defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. That puts the Giants up on the clock here. And first round, they got Travis Hunter with pick number 3 overall. So got to talk quarterback here, Sam. Is this the Jackson Dart spot here for the Giants? Yeah.
So you got to ask, do they pick Jackson Dart first and foremost at the top of the second? Secondly, you've got to ask, did Travis Hunter solve a wide receiver hole for them, or is that still a gap? Did they draft him as a corner? Did they draft him as a wide receiver? Did they draft him as a bit of both? That's because that dictates whether you're interested in a guy like Luther Burden.
What did Joe Shane say at his press conference last night? We'll just have to play off of that, right? Whatever he said, and I'm sure it was pretty generic. We'll try we'll do whatever he thinks best for the team is what we're going to do. Do we think, first off, let's talk quarterbacks here generally. Giants here at 34. Are there even any other QB needy teams? You could say that I'm looking through this. You've mentioned the Raiders. I don't think they would go at pick 37 to just take a developmental guy with Geno Smith on the roster. Maybe. 42 is the Jets. Would they want to take their developmental guy here to go with Justin Fields? Is there any other team that would actually be in the quarterback market in round 2 here? I mean, like in the very specific, like we're going to be debating Jackson Dart, Will Howard, whoever it might be. I think this is where, okay, if this gets to the point, if Dart doesn't go at 34, then we're not talking QBs until round 3 or 4 again.
I mean, I think the Colts presumably have got to be at least in that world of asking the question every time a pick comes up for them.
Colts fans are like ready to the many Colts fans, not just one, are ready to quit their fandom if the Colts take, or at least consider a quarterback in round 1. I don't know if round 2 is acceptable, but they're like, hey, we got Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. Can't waste another quarterback pick here.
Right. But at the point where you've brought in Daniel Jones to compete with Anthony Richardson, you have effectively thrown up the sign that you have very little faith in Anthony Richardson, right? Like Daniel Jones is the player you bring in as like, look, if you can't beat out this guy, we're done and we're starting over. At that point, you have to at least be thinking about the quarterbacks. Now, I agree. I wouldn't take one in round 1 if I'm the Colts because, they have other needs. They want either one of those guys to succeed. Like this thing needs to kind of win right away. but you've effectively already signaled that you don't have a huge amount of faith in that working out either way. So to not at least be thinking about quarterbacks in this draft, forget round one, but in this draft at all. And, if you think that Jackson Dart is value in the second round, I think, again, you have to at least be asking the question, whether or not you decide to do it or not. You, I think, have to at least be thinking, how valuable are these quarterbacks in the second, third, fourth, whatever rounds?
One other quick reminder as far as QB needy teams. I think we've pegged the Rams as a team that could get the future, quarterback to develop next to Matthew Stafford. Well, the Rams don't have a second rounder because they traded that last year to the Carolina Panthers. And the Steelers did not draft a quarterback in the first round. There's an assumption they'll bring in Aaron Rodgers at some point, but they also don't have a second rounder. They traded that for DK Metcalf. So two of the potential QB needy teams do not have a second round pick here. So Giants are on the clock. Would you take Jackson Dart here? I would probably bring him in, even with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston on the team. I would still probably draft Jackson Dart as the next guy, but there might be a reason why they brought in Russell Wilson and they're just going to build the roster around him and go QB next year.
Yeah, Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston is a quarterback room that doesn't have a future, right? So they need the future from somewhere. Now the question is, does this front office believe they have a future if those guys don't win? I think the Jackson Dart, the way he's being talked about, I think it's a good fit for him. Like, he could sit for the whole year theoretically, right? That combat, he's QB3 in this room. Unfortunately, that dumps Cutlets off the roster down to the practice squad. But c'est la vie. Like, Dart is a guy that can come into this room. The combination of Russ and Jameis can start all year long. Dart can legitimately develop and learn from the bench, ready to take over next year, assuming everybody in this building still has a job at that point. I think that does make a lot of sense. I generally rather feel like the top of the second round is a little bit rich for Jackson Dart, but I also feel like that's around where he's likely to go. So it's value. You didn't get the quarterback at the top of the draft. You theoretically got a blue chip, generational, however you want to term him, Travis Hunter. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. And I look, the people that are big Jackson Dart fans, when they're doing their draft grades the next day, are going to say, A+, because you just got Travis Hunter plus potential first round pick Jackson Dart. I'm good with taking Dart here for the Giants. You know how we are with quarterbacks. You got to keep taking shots at that position and get him in the room, see what he's got.
The only question is, what is the opportunity cost, right? So if you're taking Jackson Dart here, the question is, what are you leaving on the table? Now, that's Luther Burden. It's defensive talent. There's a lot of defensive linemen still available. What the Giants really need, if they're not taking a quarterback, is offensive line. And that, it's harder to find the really neat need here with the offensive lineman. You would be Josh Connerly at tackle would make some sense. But like interior offensive linemen, a couple of those went at the bottom of the first round, so they kind of went off the board. Like, I think if Gray Zabel or whatever was sitting on the board at this point, that would be an interesting conversation versus the quarterback. But absent like the clear, obvious day one starter, unless you think Connerly is that guy. And I saw Mike Tice, Nate Tice's father and former head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, thinks Josh Connerly is the best offensive lineman in the entire draft. So basically, unless you're of the Mike Tice mindset, I feel like quarterback's the way.
Yeah, I would go quarterback, and you're right. Connerly, if Mike Tice loves him that much, I wonder if other people around the league are seeing something similar. The one last name I would throw in there is Darius Alexander, the interior pass rusher from Toledo, as a complement to Dexter Lawrence. That's another need. I think it shows there are multiple needs across this team for the Giants, because they could also add a receiver, depending on what they do with Travis Hunter. They could add a corner if you want to challenge Deonte Banks. They could go any which way. I think for these purposes, we should land on Jackson Dart here and say, hey, we took Travis Hunter and we got a guy that some believe is still a first round quarterback here at pick 34.
Look at Trevor sticking to his board. And when it comes to quarterbacks, we got Milroe QB3, Will Howard QB4, Riley Leonard QB5, all before Jackson Dart at QB6.
Sometimes the update is delayed, so it could be true, but sometimes,
either way, this has been for a while now. Like, you'd have to go back quite some time to find a point in time where that would make sense.
Yeah, I am curious
for most people.
I am curious if he's updated that or not. But yeah, Dart certainly much lower on the PFF board than others.
All right, Jackson
Dart
Dart
to the Giants. Selecting Dart to the Giants puts the Tennessee Titans up on the clock at pick 35. Of course, they got Cam Ward with their first selection. They don't pick here for a while, right? After this, they don't pick until pick 103. So if you're a Titans fan, this is huge, right? You kind of know you're getting Cam Ward, and then coming back at pick 35, you can't fill every need with one pick. They would be a team that I know would love to trade down. And so do you want to play that game, Sam? Like we talked about, maybe New England would want to come up and get Luther Burden. Maybe the Bears, who have 2 picks. There's a few teams that have 2 picks. The Bears, 2 picks in the second round, that is. Bears, Seahawks, and Bills all have 2 picks in the first round. Would anyone want to trade up here for the Titans with the Titans? Because I think they would love to trade down, even though there's some very good players on the board that they could use.
I like that. I like the Patriots trading up for one of these wide receivers, Luther Burden or Emeka Egbuka, or our guys from Iowa State, who are going to be lower on Trevor's board, but are Jaden Higgins here at 49, who we've been pushing the first round propaganda all the way. And then Jalen Noel. I don't know. How high do you think the ceiling, like how high could Jalen Noel end up going?
I could be way off on this because
I don't think you are, though.
I see him going in the 40s. You know, it's not like that specific, but I would not be surprised if he goes as high as 40. Right. I mean, like I came to as I said the other day, guys who have a 4.3 something next to their name, who are good receivers, not raw, not, can't run routes, can't get in and out of breaks. Those guys usually go in the first 2 rounds. I would not be surprised if Noel's, somewhere in the 35 to 50 range, I would say, from Iowa.
Everybody has the same sort of experience with Jalen Noel when it comes to watching his tape. Like they dive in expecting to see this sort of relatively, limited cliched player, and then everyone is like surprised by how good he is. So I don't know how high he can go, but I think it's higher than a lot of people expect. Like I think it's significantly higher than, the anticipation is. So I'm just saying I wouldn't trade up for him at 35, but I think he's on the radar at this point is what I would say.
The only thing is if, because we're GM for every team, if we're in New England at 38 and just going to trade up to 35, they're going to get at least one of Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel. There's going to be receiver options there at 38. Yeah. So it's not like you and I aren't fully convicted on just one guy. I think we both have Burden as the next wide receiver off the board here, but not enough conviction that we would, trade up 4 spots as a team that has so many needs like New England. So I don't know if I would make that move if I was New England, but I could see them saying, Membu at 4, we got our tackle. Let's just make sure we lock in one receiver, and we've got the, that 1-2 punch coming out of the draft.
Yeah, it's not a move we would make, but it's a move I think that you could see the Patriots making out of sort of quote unquote desperation. Like they've spent an offseason kind of swinging and missing at wide receivers. They tried to get
Chris Godwin.
Yeah, Chris Godwin from the Bucs, who went back for more money. They ended up sort of settling for Stephon Diggs on a contract that's pretty rich and doesn't make a ton of sense just because he's the only guy available, and they needed to make something happen. So you can kind of see them going, okay, generally speaking, historically, there's not much of a difference between these receivers, but we love, Luther Burden, or we love Jaden Higgins, or we love whoever it is. We got to go get that guy now. He's still on the board. And from Tennessee's point of view, so number one, the Patriots would like to get to where Tennessee is because Tennessee might take that guy, right? They're in the wide receiver market as well. From Tennessee's point of view, the reason you would go in the opposite direction with effectively the same need is you're playing the mathematics of it, right? You are acknowledging that the history says there's not a big difference between any of these wide receivers now in this block. So let's trade back a few spots. We'll take whoever's still available, and we're comfortable with the differences in these wide receivers being relatively negligible. So that if we miss out on the guy we have, right at the top of our board right now, the next guy up is effectively in a similar block. So we'll take the added trade collateral and make that move. I think it's a move that does make sense for both sides if the Patriots love one of these receivers.
You want to do this for our mock draft exercise here then?
Yeah, let's do it. Hashtag for the content.
For the content. All right. So the Patriots are going to trade up from 38 to 35. Who we take? Are we going to take Luther Burden here?
I would
I think,
take Burden, but I'm
I think we
okay
should.
with anybody effectively. Like,
I think we should do
with
that
this
because he's
building
the
as a
consent.
true X, albeit 31 coming off an ACL. They can afford to pick basically whoever their favorite is. So Burden, Ibuka, it doesn't matter if they're number 2 receivers only. Number 2 makes sense for them.
Yeah, I would take Burden. He's the consensus top guy. You and I both ranked him ahead of these other receivers. Let's trade up to get Burden. What would it won't affect our second round mock, but let's just assume the Titans are picking up at least an extra draft pick here.
Yeah,
fourth
round,
whatever it might be. Yeah,
the first fourth rounder is 106. That gives them a pretty good chance of putting this trade through, according to the sim, and it's close enough that I'm willing to do it.
Yeah, and if we played this out for the Titans, if they had that extra pick at 106, you're going to have a pretty decent player available there, and I think you'll feel a little bit better if you're Tennessee. And I think at 38, they'll also have a decent option here at receiver.
So Burden or Ibuka, 2 different types of receivers, but may have a similar deployment at the next level in terms of where they line up, how they exist. Are we going for Burden?
Yeah, I would take Burden here.
All right, done.
So Patriots trade up for Luther Burden III. That means they go Missouri twice here. I'm on Membu as their first round pick in Eric Edholm's first round mock draft, which we're using as a foundation here. And then Burden with pick 35, wide receiver out of Missouri, going to the New England Patriots. It puts the Jags on the clock at pick 36. They took tight end Tyler Warren in the first round at pick 5 overall. One of the more surprising picks of round 1 so far.
I think the Jags would love Darius Alexander here. They've been predicted to take Mason Graham in pretty much every mock draft I've seen this offseason. Instead, they throw a curveball. They grab Tyler Warren, evidently believing he's a special enough talent to warrant that selection, therefore passing up on Mason Graham, leaving still that significant hole on the interior of the defensive line. Darius Alexander, I don't think is as good as Mason Graham, but he's a hell of a consolation prize at the top of the second round.
I like that as a choice for sure. I'm good with that.
Simple.
I mean, look, I'm not gonna sit here and trash Tyler Warren the whole time. I wouldn't take him at 5. We're working off that as, hey, this is what the Jags did.
Yeah,
and I think he could be a fine player. But now adding the interior pass rush of Alexander, I think he can move around a little bit on the defensive line. He's been a huge offseason riser. Had a really good career at Toledo. Had a really nice season at Toledo, but then through the Senior Bowl all the way through here, he's moved up into this fringe first round type of range. I like that as a pick.
Yeah, and look, I've been pushing Tyler Warren as hard as anybody. I wouldn't take him at 5 either. And you would say, well, what's the difference between taking him at 5 and taking him at 7? Well, the significant difference is, who did you leave on the board to make that happen? Like, Mason Graham was on the board to make that happen.
Right.
Whether it's at 5 or 7, like, I would not pass up Mason Graham to select Tyler Warren. So I think there's a scenario that can play out where Tyler Warren at 7 makes sense for the Jets. I don't see a scenario that's possible for Tyler Warren to make sense at 5 to the Jags.
All right, man. That puts the Raiders up on the clock. Pick 37. They took Ashton Genty in the first round. And, they're another team. I think they've got plenty of needs, certainly on the defensive side of the ball. This is my favorite spot, Sam, for the corners. It really is my favorite spot for the corners who were once thought to be first rounders and had some injuries that they should come back from. Shavon Ravel from East Carolina, Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. I think the corner needy teams in the 30s and 40s are going to have, if they fall to this range, I think there's some potential steals available here. And the Raiders have Jack Jones. They brought in Eric Stokes this offseason. I mean, they're not exactly stocked at corner. I think that would be a great play for them here.
Yeah, you and Walt in lockstep. Just think it's corner time.
Haven't seen. Oh, I didn't see what Walt said. Believe it or not, I'm usually looking at I apologize for parroting what Walt said in the chat. I'm now reconsidering if let's go defensive line here for the Raiders. Trey Amos, man. I mean, him, Ravel, Morrison. I like all those guys.
So I think Ravel does make some sense for the Raiders here.
Yeah, again, I think it depends on it depends on what you're trying to do. I think if you're talking longer press man type of players, by the way, Azariah Thomas might be the very best, and he went to the Bills in this first round. Ravel's got that long press man ability. Darian Porter has that ability as well from Iowa State. Amos has some of that, but not like as freakishly long and those skills as far as I think Ravel goes. Morrison's a little different type of player. They're all pretty good though, I think, in man coverage. This next group here. That's
Which one would you pick?
I told you Amos is the guy that I was like early on a couple of years ago. Went to Bama, transferred to Ole Miss. I'm probably with him in like the second round. I think Ravel's the guy that would be a first round pick, assuming the medical checks out.
Yeah, I think Ravel's the guy that makes the most sense here.
Yeah, he's 39.
That's what Walt wants.
He's 39 on the consensus board, and then Amos is 41 on the consensus board. So they're in similar spot. Morrison's 44. There's a chunk of corners on the consensus board, all in the same spot. I'm good with Javon Ravel here for the Raiders.
Done.
All right, so let me
that
get
puts
that
Tennessee back on the clock with their having traded down with New England. So the wide receivers, the only one that went was the one the Patriots traded up to get in Luther Burden. Tennessee, of course, still has an edge need as well, and James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee has been slipping out of the first round, into the second, still on the board. So that's available as well. Josh Connerly, the Oregon tackle, who Mike Tice believes is OL1, the best offensive lineman in the entire draft, is still here. A few picks into the second round as well. There's a few guys that have slid. Where do the Titans go?
I'll tell you what. So I don't think they go tackle because of the Dan Moore investment and the JC Latham investment. So I think that's off the board here. I would be tempted, even though you and I both have Jalen Noel, at 6 in our receiver rankings. I would be so tempted to see him and Cam Ward, given Cam Ward's ability to get the ball down the field and Jalen Noel's speed. I would be so tempted by that if I was Tennessee here.
So the Titans receiving core is interesting because the only guy on it that you trust is wide receiver 2. It's Calvin Ridley, right? They need a wide receiver 1 and 3 and everything else, but they don't need wide receiver 2, really, at least immediately. And yet a lot of these guys sort of in this area are like prototypical wide receiver 2. Like Emeka Ibuka, in my opinion, is wide receiver 2, perfect profile. I think that's what Jack Besh is as well. Now, Jalen Noel, slightly more interesting than that, nuance than that. Jaden Higgins, I think, can be a wide receiver 1. Trey Harris from Ole Miss could be wide receiver 1 in an offense.
Let's not misconstrue, though. There's a difference between wide receiver 1 and X, right? I think you're describing an X to Ridley being the Z more than anything, right? Like wide receiver 1 is like the high volume, do it all player. I don't know if there's any of those receivers left. I mean, you don't find too many of those guys beyond the first round anyway.
Well, I think both those guys have the ability to be that. I don't think anybody else in this draft class necessarily does.
I am curious on the PFF board here as well. For Restrepo, it ends up falling. I don't know that it's been updated in a while. So, I mean, I'm not going to consider. I love Restrepo. I'm not going to consider him in the second round.
Oh, no. Restrepo, I mean,
skill set.
Yeah, Restrepo's numbers in terms of workouts and measurables and stuff have pushed him to day 3, maybe. Like he could easily not get drafted off the back of those numbers. If he does, I would be staggered if he goes before day 3. I did see though, I think Foster had the numbers of Restrepo's miles per hour stuff with the combine. His percentiles in terms of those running kind of like what mile per hour did you hit during the gauntlet, those types of things, they're actually pretty high. Like for a guy who runs a 4.8 and ran terribly in the the short shuttle and stuff, or averagely at best in the short shuttle, his actual on-field workout numbers are not terrible. So he's a very strange case when it comes to workout numbers.
Yeah, which backs up the fact that he said he was hurt during his 40, which I know is often, of course, like when the guy gets nailed for banned substance, it's like, oh, I didn't know, I just bought this from GNC. Most of generic answer, but yeah, there's look, there's way more ways than 40 times right now to judge players. There's way more data out there. So yeah, you could dig into it.
But that being said, it's also
ways.
like it tallies what you expect from Restrepo, in that his miles per hour number on the go route was in the first percentile. So he is slow as hell.
Oh yeah,
it's just in certain ways he's not.
But just watch him play. We don't look. I'm not gonna. I love Restrepo, one of his biggest fans. I'm probably not going to take him in round 2, even with some of these other receivers. If I can get him in round 3 or 4, fine. But given his skill set, plus the fact that when I mentioned in the breakdowns, not a lot of teams use that kind of, I call it old school, like 15 years ago, Wes Welker slot receiver. Not a lot of teams are using the slot receiver like that. They want a guy like Jalen Knoll to be a vertical slot. So the slot is different now. It's not just this up to 5-yard range type of player, up to 10-yard range type of player, where I think Restrepo is still outstanding. The guy just understands football, knows how to get open. You want verticality from your slot, which is why Jalen Knoll is the modern slot receiver. Anyway, Tennessee has other needs too.
Like, the problem with that is that's why Hunter Renfrow is now like hawking insurance or whatever he's doing instead of playing in the NFL. Like Hunter Renfrow is a really good old school limited slot receiver. Like that highlight reel of routes of Hunter Renfrow just carving up NFL cornerbacks. He can still do that, but he does it in that limited, slot specific, slot only type of role that just only X number of teams have. That's as much as anything the problem that Restrepo is working against, is that you need to find one of those teams with a gap at that spot at the time you're coming into the NFL. Otherwise, you can get immediately Hunter Renfrow out of the game and have to come up with a real job for yourself.
All right, here's the question for Tennessee. I think it's a receiver or an edge, given the depth here. James Pierce Jr. still on the board at edge. Nick Scarleton from Texas A&M, even Princely Uman-Mielen from Ole Miss. I think all of those guys could be in play here at edge, where Tennessee has a massive pass rush need, but they also have this receiver need as well. It is easier to get a good receiver later than it is a good edge. We know that that's always the case, right? But is this the right? But Tennessee, they traded for one extra pick from New England. It's still beyond 100. If they want to fill one of those needs, they pretty much have to do it here. Are we going to go receiver or are we going to go edge?
I think at this point their needed edge is pretty acute. The question is, are you comfortable enough drafting? I mean, this is just a general thing. Are you comfortable enough drafting James Pierce Jr.? I think at this point he's value. If all the stuff we don't have access to, the off-field stuff checks out, James Pierce Jr. is definite value at this point.
As the GM of every team, I am eyeing the Bears, who have 2 out of the next 3 picks after the Titans. And I was going to say the Bears have a pass rush need, and they have the extra pick in the second round. You're more willing to maybe take that chance on a Pierce. So, selfishly as a mock drafter right now, Sam, I would love to have him in play for the Bears here at pick 39, but I think it's a legitimate option for the Titans. Although I still can't get out of my head, I like Jaden Higgins, I like Emeka Ibuka, Jalen Knoll, and Cam Ward together feels like it could be special.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great spot it's definitely a need that they need to fill. But like right now, their top pass rusher is Arden Key. I mean, they desperately need pass rush.
I would say, with fewer picks, would Tennessee go a little bit safer and not deal if there is any off-field or effort issues with James Pierce? And a team like the Bears that has, two second rounders can maybe play the upside card a little bit more.
Sure, but they have the more acute need. So at some point, you just have to say the value for Pierce, who could be a first-round talent, is, at 38, too good to pass up.
All right, you want to do that for Tennessee then?
I mean, I would go edge rusher here because I think their need is way more than it is a wide receiver, but I'm open to the pass rusher. Braden Swinson from LSU is a guy that everybody is talking about at the moment. There's a lot of buzz on him about his tape being absolutely legit.
He is good. It'd be tough to put him over Pierce or Scourton for me, even if Scourton disappointed a little bit as he transferred to Texas A&M last year.
Yeah, but I mean, the Pierce thing would be easy enough. You just do it in terms of safety, off-field concerns, whatever. Like you can red flag Pierce below anybody you want. But on field, definitely.
All of these edge rushers we're going to keep discussing here as the Bears pick 2 out of the next 3 times here. So you want to go?
So which
Pierce
one are you picking?
I would take the best player, just Pierce.
Which is Pierce.
Yeah.
All right. Done.
Even though I'd love to give Cam Ward one of those receivers. All right, Bears are up on the clock here at pick 39. It's the Bears, then the Saints, then the Bears once again. Bears took who did they take? I had this earlier. They took Will Campbell in the first round.
Yes.
So tackle/guard. Maybe he plays guard. Maybe he plays tackle for the Bears. Still have that defensive line need. They've also been pegged as potential for Ashton Genty. Obviously, they didn't get him in the first round. I've been on record saying I think the second round is where the running back run happens. We'll see. I don't know if that ends up playing out that way, but with, Travion Henderson, Caleb Johnson, I think those guys absolutely in play here for the Bears.
Yeah, and Judkins, the other Ohio State running back.
Yeah. Cam Scatterbo, depending on how much you like Scatterbo. But I also think the defensive line, they're all in play. Scatterbo ran 4.65. That's expected the other day. That's what he is.
Yeah.
Kareem Hunt.
Yeah.
Kareem Hunt comp. Locked it in. I think the defensive line helped, though, for the Bears. I know they've already done some work there, but I would do more work.
Yeah, it's an interesting D line because the edge now. So it's Montez Sweat, who obviously was the kind of big acquisition and is a good player. They brought in Deo Odiingbo on the other edge in free agency. Then behind those two guys, they've got the kind of young players of Austin Booker and Dominique Robinson, both of whom have flashed, but not shown the consistency yet. It's arguably the interior is where the bigger need is, even with they brought in Grady Jarrett in free agency. I don't know what Jarrett has left, even though they're paying him quite a lot of money. And then you've still got, Gavon Dexter, Zach Piggins, the young guys from the last couple of drafts. Like that, if I was trying to add a body to that rotation, that's where I'd want the body rather than the edge.
A defensive tackle?
Yeah.
And I think we've slowly, you've got more of the underside. You can choose from a big-bodied run stopper like Tyleik Williams, or the undersized pass rusher like a TJ Sanders or Omar Norman Lott. So I don't know if I want those guys at this point. Maybe it is the running back here for the Bears.
Which one?
The other question is receiver, right? They took Roma Dunze in the first. You have a Dunze and DJ Moore. Keenan Allen's still out there as a free agent. If you want to go third receiver, if you want to go specific receiver, again, Jalen Knowles speed, maybe not Higgins because he's similar outside player as a Dunze. Maybe you just want the dependability of Ibuka next to Adunze and DJ Moore. You could play that game as well if you're the Bears. But remember, 2 picks out of the next 3 here.
The 2, and that, again, that's, I don't know if it's a smart way of doing it, but teams tend to approach these things as like bonuses. We can do something a little bit outside of the norms because we got these 2 picks. The Ohio State running backs, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, are 45 and 48 on the consensus board. So they're right in this kind of range. Right now, Chicago's running back group, it's DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, like that. It's definitely an area of need where I think they could use the upgrade.
I don't know if you've dug into Caleb Johnson's tape really in depth yet, but I think people love him. And I was surprised at how much I loved watching him on film. He reminded me of Joe Mixon. I know I'm like anti-player comps, but I'm going away from player comps. He reminded me of just really smooth zone runner that I think would be an awesome fit for Ben Johnson here in the Bears.
And then you've got Renner's guy, Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, who he absolutely loves.
Yeah. This is why I think there's going to be that running back run for a bunch of teams here. The Saints coming up next. There's a bunch of teams that could use a running back. So look, I'd consider receiver. I'd consider running back. I think they're good on the offensive line, given all the investment there. Could they go corner as well? If they're going to, potentially sour on Tyreek Stevenson opposite Jalen Johnson, that's possible. Well, he's still a starter there,
Yeah, overall, I think you've got some questions on, let's call it the back 7, because the linebackers that they signed a couple of years ago, there's talk that they could release, TJ Edwards as a cap casualty. Maybe they want to future-proof that group. Cornerback 2 is now a question because the Tyreek Stevenson confidence appears to have gone. I don't know if they're just going to plug in Terrell Smith there or if they're actually going to look for a new cornerback 2. Safety, I don't like Jaquan Brisker's concussion issue might make that a potential thing. Do we want to try and search for a new starting safety or a future starting safety with Kevin Byard getting up in age and Brisker dealing with that with the concussions last year? Jonathan Owens is there. He can step in and start, but is that enough to want to push you or to push a need at safety higher in this draft with, somebody like Xavier Watts there? So I think the entire back seven is on the table in terms of if you love somebody, draft them.
Man, the Bears could go a lot of different ways here, Sam. We got to make a choice. I think for them, running back with one of those two picks is very much in play. So I would reserve one for the running back.
Well, let's take running back here and then just get on to the next pick.
I could just see Caleb Johnson being the guy that they like and as the fit, even if he's lower on the consensus. Didn't run a great 40. I think just as a good running back, I think they would want him.
No, I feel like Judkins. In fact, I feel like both of the Ohio State guys are better players than that. TreVeyon Henderson's his.
I like TreVeyon a lot. I like him a lot.
His pass blocking is spectacular, and he's explosive. I feel like that's a really nice fit. Like TreVeyon Henderson combined with Roschon Johnson is a really nice 1-2 punch.
All right, let's do it. Fine. Take TreVeyon. We doing running back rankings this week? We'll see.
Yeah.
Saints are on the clock here at pick 40. They took Shamar Stewart at pick 9 overall, the athletic developmental edge rusher going to the Saints. I saw the PTSD comments earlier in the chat about Marcus Davenport and Peyton Turner. Now Shamar Stewart to the Saints at pick 9. So they're up on the clock with they have their own several needs, including if they want a future-proof running back. I don't think that's acute, though. I don't think they need that necessarily. Still have Kamara for a little bit, who looks pretty good. Where do you want to go here for the Saints?
So, yeah, it's a weird group because a lot of it is sort of future-proofing rather than immediate needs. Like, I've seen people talk about wide receivers and need for them, but if they're all healthy, and that's a huge if, Chris Olave, Brandon Cooks, Rashid Shaheed, like that's a really nice receiving group. It's just that they all have massive question marks at this point. Defensive tackle, I think, is still a massive need for the Saints. Like Brian Brzee is yet to develop. They got Devon Godshaw, like
they brought in
Saunders.
They brought in those two bodies though, Godshaw and Saunders.
Right, but like, did either one of them? Is that stopping you drafting somebody that you think could make an impact? It shouldn't.
No, but I think they're both, starter adjacent enough that they wanted to fill those spots before the draft.
Yeah, so
corners
you don't need to chase the need, but you still need.
I don't know about the D-tackle value at this point, though. That's the only thing. I think receivers in play, as you mentioned, and I think corners in play. Kool-Aid McKinstry, last year's second rounder. Isaac Yiadom signed. He's there to potentially start opposite Kool-Aid. I think they should be in the cornerback market and probably the receiver market. And
yeah, I would also. I think at this point,
line.
Josh Connerly, in terms of value, the Saints, that Trevor Penning's going into the last year of his deal and hasn't been particularly good. Ryan Ramczyk, we were effectively writing off as presumably on the way to retirement. They have a potential opening, and they could do what the Titans did and draft a left tackle, move Fuaga back to right tackle. Connerly's being asked to work at it either. That would give them some flexibility to put those guys in the best spots for them as well.
No, I think Connerly's definitely in play. So I think we're debating receiver, corner, and tackle. Best tackle on the board versus the receivers and cornerbacks.
Yeah. I mean, Connerly, in terms of value, the best value picks relative to the consensus board are Connerly, Scouton on the defensive line, and Emeka Ibuka, if you believe he's as good as that, which most people do.
Ibuka would be he'd be an interesting fit here. I know we're not building around Derek Carr, but another one where if you have the speed receiver, it does seem to get the best out of Derek Carr when he's got the guy that, he can throw the ball aggressively down the field too. You do have Rashid Shaheed as that guy anyway, so don't need to force my guy Jalen Nolan here. I think Ibuka should be in play. I think Trey Amos should be considered here as well at corner. Be the second straight year of a second-round corner for the Saints, and maybe they're starting 1-2 punch with all the turnover they've had the last couple of years. Lattimore leaving, Adebo leaving.
Yeah, I'd like one of the value picks. I would go with either Conley or Ibuka, even though I personally don't love Ibuka.
Yeah. Who's picking next?
But that being said, like, as much as I don't love him, this is the right kind of range for him, in my opinion. Like, you can get him at 40. I think that's great value.
For Ibuka? Yeah.
Yeah.
Even your wide receiver 11, who you hate?
I mean, yeah, because that's where
you don't hate him. You don't hate him. You don't hate him.
Yeah, I think he's good. I just don't think he's a first-round talent because of what he is. But if you can get him at 40, I think that makes a ton more sense.
I think you have to do the positional value aspect of it's difficult to find tackles. And I'm probably letting Penning walk at the end of the year. Ramczyk's out. I would take Connerly.
Let's go.
In this case here. Let's do it.
Bears up again.
Where's Connerly? Draft. Bears up again at pick 41. Remember, first round pick. They took Will Campbell at tackle. They just took Travion Henderson at running back. We could go defensive line depth here, or we could go, I'm tempted by corner. Tempted by a cornerback spot opposite Jalen Johnson and pushing Tyreek Stevenson out after 2 years.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the best value on the consensus board remaining. Scouton at 37 is the best player available on the consensus board. Trey Amos at corner, he's still available, right? Is there at 41. Ursery, the tackle from Minnesota, at 42. Benjamin Morrison at 44. So those are they're in the right area. Morrison in particular, Trey Amos, those two we were talking about.
Ibuka is the highest on the consensus board, though, right? At 33?
Yeah.
He's still the highest. I mean, that's the other option. Do you want to just pair him with Roma Dunze and DJ Moore as your dependable slot receiver for Caleb Williams?
Yeah, you could. I mean, this is, Ben Johnson taking over. The first order of business was to really go ham on that offensive line. They continued that at the top of this draft with Will Campbell. The next order of business, you would think, is, the running back is an addition. Like, it's all additions to the offense, which makes some sense when you consider who they hired and what they need to do with Caleb Williams. I'd be fine with that.
Is that too much on offense, though? So just trying to think through this without taking... No, you can never have too much on offense. I'm trying to think through this without taking 20 hours on the show here. There's still I would say there's still a decent amount of receiver depth here. And
there will be. Yeah. That will be that's an area of strength relative to the cornerback group. You will always have more receivers left than you have corners.
So if I'm the Bears in particular, they have another pick at 72. Like, by pick 72, your guy Jalen Royals could still be there. A Jack Besh could still be there. If I really wanted to have a third receiver, Besh would be fascinating, by the way, for the Bears if you want to just add some physicality to that offense. So I feel like they could get a receiver then. And right now, if they did want to have the edge depth or if they wanted a corner, they would have to do that right now.
If you want to go in the back seven, you got to do it down.
I don't know if there's any safeties I love at this point. Do you want to go corner?
I mean, Benjamin Morrison, I love in this defense.
Yeah. I'd be good with that. I'm a huge Morrison fan. I think that's getting another first-round pick here for the Bears.
We do that?
Sure. Let's do it.
Benjamin Morrison, the Notre Dame cornerback, coming off an injury.
Let's do a little reset here. Just if you're just tuning in, we did not do the first round. We stole NFL.com's Eric Edholm. He just took his first round pick, which involved a few trades. It involved Shadur Sanders going to the Browns at pick 15. They took Abdul Carter, then traded up for Shadur Sanders at pick 15. Used that first round as a base, and then we're filling in the second round. Sam, if you want to just go through what we've done so far in the second round here.
Yeah, so after trading down from the first, the Atlanta Falcons were picking with pick number 33. We fielded some trade offers, but we ended up selecting Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss, as the best value pick with 33. 34, Ole Miss back-to-back. The Giants grab their quarterback and get Jackson Dart, who won't need to see any game time in year one behind those two veterans. Number 35, the Patriots trade up and grab Luther Burden III from Missouri. 36, the Jags get defensive tackle, having passed on one in the first round, and get Darius Alexander from Toledo. 37, the Raiders pick Siobhan Ravel, the East Carolina cornerback. 38, the Titans halt the slide of Tennessee volunteer James Pierce Jr. and keep him in Tennessee. 39, the Chicago Bears use the first of their second-round picks on running back Travion Henderson from Ohio State. Pick number 40, the Saints grab Josh Connolly Jr. from Oregon. And number 41, the Bears come back and grab Benjamin Morrison, the Notre Dame cornerback.
Yeah, and I know that might feel like a lot at corner for the Bears. I mean, you're in a division with the Vikings, the Packers, the guys, teams that just have depth at receiver. You got to cover the Lions. And I could just see them souring on Tyreek Stevenson at this point. So Benjamin Morrison, Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon. Man, I'm always a believer in depth at the cornerback position. I think that'd be a good play for the Bears. All right, let's go. Jets at pick 42 here. First time around, they took – who did they take? I just looked at it. We just had it.
Mason Graham. Right?
Jets took Mason Graham, defensive tackle out of Michigan. That's going to feel like a steal. I think the Jets are in one of those difficult spots. But because Tyler Warren went at 5, that's going to feel like a steal for me if I'm the Jets at 7, taking Mason Graham. And now they're up on the clock at 42. I definitely think so. We could play the quarterback game and say, do you want to get a developmental quarterback here to bring in with Fields? Or do you want to fill the receiver need that you have with some of these top options on the board here?
I would definitely grab receiver at this point. I mean, they've got Josh Reynolds, they've got Allen Lazard. Like everybody outside of Garrett Wilson is not somebody that you're particularly confident in at this point for the Jets. So I would still be looking at that.
Ibuka here is the top option. Of course, we love the Iowa State guys, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll. Can go a few different ways here at receiver.
Yeah, Ibuka teaming him up with Ohio State alum as well, Garrett Wilson, Ohio State, Justin Fields, Ohio State. It's a whole Ohio State passing game.
Do you want to just go all Ohio State? By the way, this is the reason why the second round is so interesting to me is because there's always so many players that you like that we've considered as high as 33 that are still here at 42 that will still be here around 50. And so it's going to feel like there are good players available. And by the way, in real life, there are curveballs, right? There's always some like blocking tight ends that goes by pick 50 that you weren't expecting that I wouldn't consider that high. I'm not as high on the tight end. So that's why round 2 is always so interesting to me. I'm good with Ibuka here, just going with the best consensus board player for the Jets and going with the full Ohio State connection.
Yeah, I would select a different receiver, but I think it makes too much sense to put Ibuka here. And I think he is value. Like I have no problem whatsoever with the value of Ibuka at 42. So I think it makes sense. Done.
Take him. For Browns fan Caleb, who just got here, we're using Eric Edholm's first round mock draft. He's asking about the Browns. Well, they took Abdul Carter and Shadur Sanders. Figure it out. Now they traded up to get Shadur at 15. How about that? You feeling good as a Browns fan? How about that? A little positive. Now, I wonder if a team like the Browns that's just had so much negativity, just making wild moves like that, not wild, but, aggressive moves like that, just to get the fan base back on board, just to get more excited. Hey, we have Abdul Carter and Shadur Sanders, just to get the excitement back after you've just, kicked them while they're down the last couple of years with Deshaun Watson.
I mean, generally speaking, so as much as it doesn't seem like an optimal strategy to kind of trade up for players that aren't quarterbacks. Fans never care, right? Like when the Saints went ham and traded up for Marcus Davenport, no Saints fan was like, "Oh, it's a terrible move. I hate it." They're all like, "Yeah, we got our guy. Let's go!" Like
they
you get excited by
their
that.
guy. They love their guy. They went and got him.
Right.
Love that. So Browns fans, they should be excited about that.
49ers up at 43 in the first round. The 49ers grabbed Jalen Walker, which is not a combination I've seen a ton. Number 11. So they get the hybrid / just, undersized, unusual shaped edge rusher in Georgia's Jalen Walker. And now they're here in the second round, ready to go.
Unusual shaped.
So it's like 6'2", 245.
I know.
Which, by the way, whose measurements that's almost exactly the same as?
Von Miller.
Nope. Although it might be. I think he's like 6'2", 248, something like that. So it is but not the one I had in mind.
Who?
Robert Mathis.
Ooh, okay. Robert Mathis is the undersized pass rusher. I like that.
You're telling me Jalen Walker can't play on the edge and Robert Mathis was good to cook at whatever he was, 6'2", 245?
No, I think I've seen Jalen Walker with the Niners a little bit. So they are so depleted on the defensive line. And I've made the statement before. This is a great draft to double up on defensive linemen if you need it. And the Niners have an opportunity to do that right now. They have the opportunity to double up on the defensive line. I also think cornerback is a possibility here. They have Renardo Green from last year, who looks really good. Diamador Lenore as kind of a slot outside hybrid. Do you want to add a third cornerback there? So I think the cornerback option could be in play. Trey Amos again. Or do you double up and say, okay, we have Nick Bosa. We bring in Jalen Walker. We could use another edge and a Nick Scourton and just, add depth and movable chess pieces, or interior pass rusher, a guy like a TJ Sanders, because they have some big needs on the interior right now.
Yeah, I mean the whole defensive line outside of Nick Bosa is a disaster right now. As you said,
Tyleik Williams, by the way, sorry, really quick. Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, again, more of like a nose tackle, run plugger type. You have a Sanders, you have Omar Norman Lott, who has some injury concerns, might drop him, but undersized interior pass rushers who are available. So different styles defensive tackles here.
Yeah, I think they could definitely double up on the defensive line, whether it's interior or on the edge. Obviously, interior makes more sense if you've already addressed one edge spot with the other one. But the 49ers, I think that's their biggest area of need in significant way is the defensive line. And they have a ton of draft picks.
Right. So is this too redundant if you just add another edge or a guy like Uman Mielen as just a designated pass rusher? I mean, him and Walker, are they too redundant as undersized pass rush types opposite Nick Bosa?
I mean, I don't think they're redundant. I would look for defensive tackle, but honestly, the next two draft picks could be defensive tackles given their needs. Like they could draft TJ Sanders here. I mean, whoever falls, maybe like a TJ Sanders here and a CJ West in the third round, if he gets that far, would be a really nice duo to add.
I think Alfred Collins is actually more in play here than where's he on the consensus? Texas is Alfred Collins. So he's at 54 on the consensus board. I think he's in play because that's a different body type, right? We're talking about 330, can move, can rush the passer a little bit at 320, 330. I think Collins might be a better, all-around player than some of those guys listed ahead of him.
Yeah,
I honestly
but I think
he's a possibility here for the Niners.
I think the next two picks for them, like 43 and 75, could both be defensive tackles.
Yeah, I'd be good with that. I mean, look, Sanders is high on the PFF board. I've seen him as high as the first round for Daniel Jeremiah. He's lower on the consensus board. The consensus board defensive tackles have Tyleik Williams, then Alfred Collins next. I'd be good with Collins.
Hurt himself at his pro day. He's all right, right?
As far as I know, yeah. I haven't heard anything. I don't know if the chat wants to update us if there's anything wrong with Tyleik Williams beyond. I think he just pulled something. He said he was fine.
Yeah.
I think Alfred Collins actually could be the play here for the Niners. Is this high? And maybe it's high for him at 43, but that's what happens.
Yeah.
During the draft.
All right, I'm good with that.
Alfred. So there's your double up at a massive position of need for the Niners, just defensive line generally. Cowboys are up now.
And if it goes the way we're talking, it could be a triple up with the first three draft picks all being defensive linemen.
Really could be. Cowboys took Marion Hampton at pick 12. So they got their running back at pick 12. This might be sprint to the podium to get Nick Scourton time, though, for the Cowboys. Edge need, DeMarcus Lawrence out, having a pass rusher opposite Micah Parsons.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a significant area of need. You've got, young guys they've drafted, Marshawn Nealand, but yes, this is a huge addition.
All of our good receivers. I mean, we're usually like let's play fantasy football and add as many receivers as possible. I've changed through the years, Sam, that there's so many good receivers still on the board here.
Well, I haven't changed as much as I feel like it's such a deep group that you can wait. Like you can come back in the third round, fill a more acute need in the second and still be comfortable with who's going to be left.
All right, so we can debate edge. I would consider Scarton, and I would consider the receivers. Or are we going to, like what we've done with other teams is said, hey, next time around, when's their next pick? Their next pick is 76. There could still be a good receiver there. But if we are considering receivers, who's the best option next to CD Lamb? Speed of Jalen Knowles, size of Jaden Higgins.
I mean, I love any of the receivers left with CD Lamb already there. Like any of these guys, Higgins, Jack Besh, Trey Harris, Jalen Knoll, Jaden Royals, like any of those guys with this would be, I think, great.
Do you want to make the Knoll pick here to get the speed?
I would take Scarton. I think that's like I'm still comfortable. Dallas they pick at 76, but they also have a ton of day 3 picks that if they love a receiver that's available, a little bit higher than 76, they could jump up and grab him a few spots. I would take Scarton and then figure out receiver later.
All right. That was my initial instinct.
Yeah, I think it's correct.
All right, let's do that. Scarton to the Cowboys. Coulter at pick 45 here. They took Colston Loveland in the first round at pick 15, pick 14. Where do we want to go here for the Colts? They need starting offensive linemen, right? Potentially.
Ish. They had
they have a center replacement, last year's draft pick, Bortolini.
Promotions from within.
They could consider. We haven't talked about guards a ton at this point, and it's usually a spot where you could pick. Have starting guard options though.
Because remember, for the Colts, like they lost 2 starters, but both starters had missed a lot of time. So like the backups, the replacements have seen game action quite significantly.
We have Goncalves potentially stepping in. He played some tackle last year. I don't know. I think guard could be in play. Linebacker, is that in play? No, they traded. No, I made up that trade, didn't I? The Jermaine Pratt trade.
Yeah,
linebacker could be in play here. Sure. Schlesinger, Carson Schlesinger, Demetrius Knight, the next couple guys that on the consensus board or on the PFF board.
It's funny because the Colts feel like they're in sort of disarray a bit because of the Richardson, Daniel Jones thing, right? And they might not have a quarterback, but actually you look at the rest of the roster and it's in pretty good shape. I mean, Colston Loveland fills their most acute need at tight end. They've done real work overhauling the secondary this offseason, going from, this extreme cover 3 type of defense to just any new system. So you bring in guys like Charvarius Ward, Cameron Bynum, like they've done work there. The defensive line could still use depth, but it's not like, it's not a glaring need. The offensive line, again, could use depth, but those 2 starters that are coming in have seen significant game time and have been fine. Like this is not a team that has a lot of holes on it.
So I like the cornerback value, but they brought in Charvarius Ward, and I think between Juju Brents and Jalen Jones and Samuel Womack competing opposite him, probably find one starter out of that trio. Opposite Ward, Kenny Moore playing the slot. As much as I would love to add a corner there, I think linebacker with Schlesinger could be the way to go here.
Yeah, linebacker.
They paid Cameron Bynum.
There is the second guy in PFF's board. Demetrius Knight from South Carolina is a little bit higher, but he's also there. Chris Paul Jr. from Ole Miss.
Schlesinger's at 57 on the consensus board. Knight is at 82. I know Knight is at, I think Zerline likes him quite a bit, and the PFF board so far right now has him higher. So
Schlesinger is a really interesting guy because I think you can paint a picture where he's really hitting the league on the ascent. I mean, he was the guy that showed up and did his sort of workout numbers like 20 plus pounds heavier than he was listed at UCLA. Normally that goes the exact opposite direction. Guys show up and they're like 20 pounds lighter than they were listed. For a guy to show up that much heavier and put out like outstanding workout numbers suggests that this is someone that's like grown into a frame in a way that, teams love to see. Like now you're a 240 plus pound linebacker putting up eye-popping workout numbers. That's got some juice to it.
Yeah, only a 1-year starter. I mean, he's got under 900 snaps in his career, Schlesinger. So remember that debate we used to have with Tremaine Edmonds coming out where he was inexperienced and, perceived upside and everything. I think he's in play. The one last thing I'll bring up is developmental quarterback. Do we do it?
I mean, I don't love any quarterback at this spot.
Yeah, I wouldn't at this point. You want to go Schlesinger?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Linebacker out of UCLA going to the Colts to pair with Zaire Franklin in Tennessee. So there's Schlesinger to the Colts. Puts the Falcons back on the clock at 46. This is now their second rounder. They traded down from 15, picked up extra picks from the Browns. First one was pick 33. In the second round, they got Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, and now they're back on the clock at 46. Another team that could do the double up on the defensive line if the value is there.
Yeah, the big unknown for them is like what they think internally from all the young guys that they drafted last year. I mean, remember, once they picked Michael Penix Jr. at 8 instead of going for the edge rusher that everybody expected them to, they then just like spammed the defensive line for the rest of that draft. And none of those guys worked out year one. Injuries and whatever were a big part of it. But like Braylon Trice, Brandon Dorlus, Rook Orororo, these are all players that were drafted and basically are unknown quantities at this point. So, I mean, I don't know if they have any idea what they're going to be going forward, but they would have a better idea than the rest of us who really haven't seen them much at all. Like how much faith do they have in any of those guys?
I really like the chat's suggestion for Princely Umanmielen in doubling up at Ole Miss. That would mean, though, what you just said. It's not 3 significant draft picks, but a 2, 3, and a 4 last year on defensive line. And in this case, it would be 2 second-rounders. So over a 2-year period, you better figure out defensive line with those 5 players. But that's not a bad team-building strategy.
No, it wouldn't be
right?
crazy. It's awkward, right? It's like you spend these draft picks and it's not the problem isn't that it's not the decision you're making now. Like the problem is that unfortunately those guys just didn't show you anything year one to be confident in them going forward. And that's not necessarily a failing in process. It's just bad result.
Yeah, that would be just a really interesting team to watch how those guys developed. I'd be good with Princely, man. I mean, now you're talking about he's more of a designated pass rush type. And here's what's on the roster. Leonard Floyd, Arnold Ebiketie. Floyd can play early downs, still play the run okay. Princely's in for me, the Brian Burns type of mold where I don't think he's great against the run, but you just let him rush off the edge. I'm good with taking that guy in the second round. And now you add him, you got Walter Nolan on the interior and those other guys that you mentioned. So there's some depth and some options.
Yeah.
If you add him to the mix.
Pass rushing grades last year, pretty elite pass rush win rate as well at 22.8%. I think it makes sense.
I'm good with it. Let's do it. Princely going to the Falcons at pick 46. It puts the Cardinals on the clock at pick 47. I believe they took Will Johnson. No, Jahdae Barron. They took cornerback. Yeah. So got the corner in the first round. Another team that could use all sorts of defensive line help. Even though they've made some moves in free agency, they're trending in the right direction. I think there's a little bit more to do up front for the Cardinals or just generally on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think they could just use impact playmakers at all 3 levels. Like they've done some significant work on that defensive line. I think they've been good moves. You know, we joked that you look at that, you sort of read the names out of their defensive linemen last year. It was like looking at a preseason team, right? Like all these guys belong in the NFL. Just I don't know that any of them belong starting. Now they've started to add the starting names to that group of like preseason, depth rotation bodies with free agency and the moves they've made. So I think they've moved in the right direction with, guys like Dalvin Tomlinson and Josh Sweat. And I still think that Baron Browning may be able to take a step forward if he's was legitimately, battling through injuries last year. So suddenly the group looks a lot better, but you could still add an impact player on the defensive line. You could still add a linebacker. You could still add an impact player in the secondary, either at safety or at corner. So as long as this pick effectively is on defense, I'm good with it.
Or Sam, are they the team for Jalen Knoll? Are they the team that adds Knoll's speed to Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch?
Man,
that's actually a really good fit now that I'm thinking.
It is a really nice fit.
Right? And I'm listening to your diatribe. It's got to be defense. I was listening. I agree with all of it. But now I'm thinking the few good fits with Knoll. I've been trying to squeeze him in a few different places here. I kind of love this fit for the Cardinals.
It's a really nice fit.
Yeah.
And this is a team that doesn't have a ton of draft picks. So if they want to make that move, I mean, they have one at 78 in the third round. So it's not like, they're out of the receiver, but like this would be a spot. They don't have too many swings of the bat.
I think I would do that. The only thing I hate in this situation is we don't have a lot of interior offensive linemen coming off the board, but I think that's where the value is going to be, is more like round 3 for them. That's also where the surprises come in round 2, right? There's always like a random guard or, there's random safeties that come off the board, tight ends, as I've mentioned. I like the Jalen Noel fit here, though, quite a bit.
Are you comfortable taking Jalen? Now, I love the fit, but are we comfortable taking him above all of the other receivers that are still available on the board? Jaden Higgins, Ayoma Noor from Stanford, Trey Harris, Jack Besh, Isaiah Bond from Texas, Jalen Royals. Like, there's a lot of names that we're ignoring to pick Royals because of the fit.
To pick Noel. Yeah, the only person I'd consider is Higgins. I mean, I have Higgins ranked ahead of Noel, but I hate saying redundancy in receivers, because if you just have 2 good receivers, it's okay. That's allowed. I just think that the skill set that Noel brings to the table is completely different from the skill set the top 3 receivers currently have on Arizona.
Yeah, it is.
And that's the fit that I like, even though I like Higgins better in other situations. I like him better than the others, though, that you mentioned.
No, I love Noel's fit. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Noel to the Cardinals. Just a thought exercise. They got a corner in the first round, so that's good. Miami Dolphins on the clock at pick 48. Dolphins in the first round, pick 13. They went Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan. Is this...
So they still have a desperate need on the offensive line, you would say?
I would say so. Whether that's developmental tackle, is that Ariante Ursary from Minnesota? Is it
Donovan
Jackson at guard? More of a guard than a tackle, but we've seen him kick out to left tackle and play well. I mean, he could give you a nice little depth piece here for Miami.
I would love Donovan Jackson at this spot. I think would be awesome. Like, yeah, maybe he's a guard. There are 2 holes left, 2 biggest gaps you would say on that offensive line are left guard and right tackle. He could conceivably fill either one of those for you.
Keep Liam Eichenberg out of the lineup. Recently re-signed Liam Eichenberg. Let's just go to the podium.
Anything you can do to keep that happening.
I'm good with that. Donovan Jackson.
Done. Easy.
Now this is where Dolphins fans complain we didn't talk about it enough.
Yeah. I mean, look, sometimes the fit just makes sense. We talked about it. He fills either one of 2 needs. It's the offensive line. He's good. Like, Donovan Jackson was a guard, kicked out at the tackle to replace the injured Isaiah Simmons for Ohio State. Looked good doing it. Then rocked up at the combine and looked more fluid and comfortable doing the drills than all of the tackles, despite theoretically being a guard. So I think all of a sudden he's the one offensive lineman that people are projecting in the opposite direction. There's half a dozen college tackles that are being kicked inside to guard, including, maybe Will Campbell, et cetera. But Donovan Jackson's the one guy where people are going, well, he was a college guard, albeit who moonlighted a tackle, but this dude moves like a tackle. He's built like a tackle. He looks like a tackle.
There you go. Big win here for the Dolphins at pick 48, taking Donovan Jackson to go with Will Johnson, their first round pick. That puts the Bengals up on the clock at pick 49. They took Mike Green, I believe. Yep, Mike Green.
Yep.
That was my son Benny put his first mock draft out there last night. He also had Mike Green to the Bengals in a not so shocking
how old?
draft. Benny's 6.
Got it.
Benny also had Will Howard going number 1 overall to the Titans. So look, he's either hearing something or maybe he's not perfect. But Mike Green, a common pick for the Bengals. I like that in round 1. I think they're another team. Could they double up? Could they be TJ Sanders, interior defensive lineman from South Carolina, and getting the interior pass rush? Could they be looking at interior offensive line? A couple different ways I think the Bengals could go here. Linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, given all the money they spent on that receiving core and Joe Burrow, people are going to want them to hit defense, even though I said this I was on Mina Kimes' podcast, and she kind of poo-pooed it a little bit. I feel like this Bengals defense could get a lot better quite quickly. Like I think it shouldn't have been as bad as it was a year ago. Like it's
Of course.
it's not
They lost their
entirely.
they lost Dax Hill and DJ Turner. The guys,
Right.
they're the two corners that were playing the very best at that position. And the pass rush just aged quickly opposite
And
Trey Hendrickson.
it's not entirely, but it's broadly the same group that was playing at an extremely high level and had people talking about Lou Anarumo as being one of the best, coordinators in the NFL. And then it falls off a cliff. It plays like crap. Lou Anarumo gets fired, and it was seen as the problem. But I feel like that group could have even if it's not, amazing, could have a perfectly average defensive season, overnight, just with a switch in coaching and a couple of pieces, added ancillary, and guys getting back healthy. This idea that this defense is in rack and ruin and the whole thing needs to be overhauled, I think it's kind of overstated. Sorry.
I mean, it happens in the NFL all the time, where just a defensive coordinator change with similar personnel can spark things. We know that's the volatility of defense. So I don't think you're crazy, Sam, just to affirm what you're saying. I think we have to look at the guard options here, though, the offensive line options, given that Cody Ford and Cordell Volson are in there. Lucas Patrick comes in. There's no locked-in starting guard here for I mean, they could start if needed, but it's not a great group.
I mean, if it feels like interior, the inside of both trenches are the biggest problems, guards and defensive tackles.
Let me tell you who I love is Mullet, Tate Ratledge. He's only at 75 on the consensus board, 91 on the PFF board. I think his RAS was 9.9 something. It was high. He's just a good football player. Dog. Literal dog. Georgia.
Plus
Bulldog.
the mullet.
Plus the mullet. Just a good football player. And when you look at the other options at guard, they're all much lower on the consensus board. And as I said, you're going to have guards go in the second round that are low on the consensus board. It's just where they are. The two guys ahead of him on the consensus board, Arizona and Marcus Embo from Purdue. I think Ratledge is better than both guys. I don't think that's a crazy pick here.
Okay.
Tate Ratledge to the Bengals.
Gonna do that?
Yeah. Come in and play left guard right away.
Done.
Bengals fans, you're going to like it. You're going to like it. Now, this could be Sam, Jaden Higgins to the Seahawks. Seahawks are up here at pick 50. Jaden
like that.
Higgins, future Seahawk here.
Oh, I like that a lot.
I don't think in real life, I think Schneider is trading up to 40 to get him. He's going to get Higgins. Just
Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cooper Kupp, and Jaden Higgins. I love that.
So they already got Tyler Booker in round 1.
Yeah.
They got their guard. Higgins is the pick here for the Seahawks at 50.
Yeah, I love that. Run it in.
Beautiful. Jaden Higgins to the Seahawks. So what did you say? Higgins, JSN. Who else did you say?
Cooper Kupp.
Cooper Kupp, of course. It's beautiful. They rejigged the wide receiver room in an offseason. Look at that. I like that quite a bit. Broncos already took. Oh, man, I got something for you here at 51. Broncos already took
Tetairoa
McMillan at pick 20. I think I have a birthday song. Yes.
I'm not singing this.
Yeah. Broncos at 51. Scatterboo
at 51.
Scatterboo for the Broncos. I texted a GM about Scatterboo. He came back and said, quote, dog, end quote.
Yeah. Everyone's going to be like that. But that is how high do you take a dog?
Just saying. If they had him and Estime as a 1-2 punch, how could you have a bad running game?
Would you take Scatterboo above Judkins? Because that's he would be the top running back on most boards.
I have a little more work to do on Judkins. I've got enough of a first impression. He's fine.
Fine. Man, what a hater.
He's fine. Caleb Johnson's still on the board, right?
Caleb Johnson is. Dylan Sampson is.
I mean, those guys probably go higher than Scattaboo ran a 4.65, like I said, which is expected. He'll probably go round 3 or lower.
But was explosive. Like the workout numbers were elite.
Yeah. I mean,
jumps, rather. Explosive numbers.
Personally, I think I would take Scattaboo as the next running back off the board. I would. I think Caleb Johnson, though, teams are going to like him more than Judkins. That's my prediction.
So,
but
the other question
are they definitely going? Sorry, really quick. Are they definitely going running back here? Is the part of
I don't think they're definitely going, but I think running back's probably the biggest weakness. But I don't think they're out of the wide receiver market. Cortland Sutton, obviously, they're number one. Marvin Mims was getting, work across various different sort of positions, alignments last year. But is he like a clear number 2? How much do they like, Devon Vele? Troy Franklin didn't show much year 1. Do they actually project him forward to be anything other than a day 3 swing and a miss? They could be a team to just look at the wide receiver depth and go, this is too good to pass up. Let's grab one of these guys.
They just took Teteroa McMillan, though.
Oh, that's true. Sorry. Yeah, I forgot who they took in the first round.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. You were cooking, but
yeah, it's a good flow. Pointless flow, but good.
It's good flow. Oh, it's round 2, baby. It's round 2. I think they're one of those rosters, though. Not that you're always picking for need here, but they're feeling pretty good about their roster, top to bottom. I think they're going to look running back here. The one other place, I know I've given them corners at other times, and it's like, no, we're good there. But Trey Amos is really good value here at this point.
Yeah. What's the top consensus board remaining look like at the moment?
Tough to sort that out. Amos is near the top. So I know they got Riley Moss opposite Pat Surtain, Jaquan McMillan playing the slot at corner, but I think, again, Amos is really good value. Jalen Milrose high, Arante Ursary high on the board. Amos is the top guy, I believe.
Yeah, Amos and Ursary.
Then Jalen Milroe, then Quinshaw Junkins, Xavier Watts. Look, they've done a nice job. We always talk about fill your needs in free agency. They brought in Dre Greenlaw, brought in Hufanga to play safety. They filled starting spots, right? They filled a lot of needs. They just drafted Teteroa and McMillan in the first round. They brought in Evan Ingram to play tight end. They've filled a lot of their starting options here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're either drafting depth players, a running back, or backups, which is not a bad place to be, but is just that's where they are.
I'm good with going like the consensus board Quinshawn Junkins route at running back, but I think running back's definitely in play for them here.
All right, yeah, I would take Judkins just because that seems to be the consensus rather than Scattaboo.
Even though I'd rather have Scattaboo.
The consensus is going to have everybody from Ohio State higher than everyone else.
Of course they are.
That's why that had Ibuka over the Iowa State guys. Now it's having Judkins over Arizona State.
Always. All right, so we going Judkins to the Broncos?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Seahawks are back up on the board. This is the Steelers pick here that they traded for.
Yeah,
Steelers. So I mean, I always say when you trade pick for player, it never feels good on draft night. The Seahawks were on the other end of this last year, where they did not have a second round pick. Clearly had some needs that they wanted to fill, particularly offensive line. They ended up getting a third round guard. This year they balance it out. Now they have two second round picks and 2 out of 3 picks, 50 and 52. That's also why I do wonder if the receiver that the Seahawks love is on the board in the high 30s or the fifth or low 40s, if they're a trade up type of team because they have the extra 2.
Or if they keep the 2 picks, they have to go wide receiver with the first one so that people don't like side by side DK or this guy.
Yeah.
You have to take him with the pick that wasn't the one you got for DK.
Yeah, because if they picked Higgins right now at pick 52, it's like, oh, you traded DK Metcalf for Jaden Higgins straight up.
Right.
Like,
so you got to take him first and then just use something else with that pick.
Yeah, not exactly. So where do we want to go here with Seattle?
So they've theoretically filled one of the 2 starting spots on the offensive line. Like the biggest problem, left guard with Tyler Booker. presumably they're going to be okay with Anthony Bradford starting the other spot, though that's, a risk. The receiving core now looks really good with Jaden Higgins in there. Is this defensive addition somewhere?
It could be. I think safety could be in play here, depending on how much they love. I mean, they have Julian Love there, but Kobe Bryant as the starter. Opposite him is Xavier Watts, another Notre Dame guy. He's more of a true free safety. I think he might be a little redundant to Julian Love there as a safety. Do you double up on the offensive line? Do you get a second offensive line here? The other, listen, this will be my take once we get to O-line. I like the Georgia interior offensive lineman. Jared Wilson, the center. Ratledge, who we already had off the board. Dylan Fairchild's the guard. I think they're grossly underrated in all the rankings. Wilson could be the starting center of the future here for Seattle. He's at like 91 or so, I think, on the consensus board right now. So these are going to feel like reaches. I don't know where he is. He's low.
What if?
Go ahead. He's at 81.
What if we keep adding weaponry and Noah Fant is fine, but this is a rich tight end group? What if the second wave of tight ends starts now?
I'm lower on the tight ends in this group. I want to bump all of them down around. I'm tight end hater. I am a tight end hater this year.
You've got elite level athletes like Elijah Arroyo from Miami, Mason Taylor from LSU, bloodlines of Mason Taylor, direct bloodlines to elite NFL caliber players. Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green.
I like Harold Fannin. I like Fannin. Fannon's dropping. I don't think he should be. I like Fannin.
And then, local boy, Terrence Ferguson, Oregon, local-ish.
Those guys are all meh. Taylor, Ferguson. Taylor's solid. Like, they're all solid. I'm going to overuse the word solid.
Solid guy.
Mason Taylor is the most solid. He is the Thomas Jones of solid tight ends.
Dude.
Of solid tight ends. They're all right. I like Fannin. This will feel high for him at 52, though.
You should love this. I'm giving big people love. Big-ish.
I'm not biased toward big people.
You're just biased against little people.
Yes. I am interested in Jared Wilson, man. If they had Tyler Booker and Jared Wilson added to that offensive line.
You'd think that the team that doesn't like spending high picks on an interior offensive lineman is going to take two of them in the first three picks?
Yep. Maybe you get him later. How am I bad at... Tell me where I'm bad at predicting tight ends. Explain where I've been bad. When I said don't draft Drew Sample in the second round, don't draft Luke Schoonmaker in the second round, Dallas Cowboys, just because he could do some on-the-move stuff. Yeah, remind me where I'm bad at tight end here.
All right. I can't even remember your tight end track record.
We haven't even ranked tight ends for the last 5 years because who the heck watched tight end rankings?
Like I can't even tell you what your tight end takes are.
Anyway, it's an interesting board right now because the Seahawks have pretty good depth. Like Trey Amos is one of the top players left. They have good depth on the defensive line. They have good depth at corner. They're good in a lot of places where I think some of the best players are.
Yeah, well, this is where I think the start of the transition is from, immediate impact starter / significant contributor to maybe you're drafting depth at this point. And that's fine. That happens in every draft, but this might be the kind of crossover point.
That's why I'm saying you might have a starting center in Jared Wilson.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
That's fine. You want me to take him here? That's where we're taking him?
What's their next pick? Let's see. Seattle also has a pick at 82. He's 81 on the consensus board. I'm just saying, realistically, we might have fewer offensive linemen going than what happens in reality. You know what I mean? And the consensus board's low on some of the O linemen that need to be pushed up a little bit. That'd be my suggestion. I think if you have Booker and Wilson and Jaden Higgins with your first three picks, I'd be feeling good if I'm the Seahawks.
I'm just doing it to get on to the next pick.
What the heck time is this?
Tampa Bay on the clock. The pick number 53. The Bucs with their first round pick selected Jihad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama. So they are now up again. Team still need some defensive line help. I mean, defense all over could use some additions. But again, we're into like, this might be just depth and rotation at this point.
Yeah, let me take a look. Is Amos in play here? I keep thinking that they have a corner need just because last year they did until Zion McCollum broke out. And
yeah,
they have McCollum and Jamel Dean as a 1-2 punch, which is solid. Cogent. They got their linebacker in the first round. They do have very good receiver depth with Chris Godwin coming back in last year's Jalen McMillan pick. I think safety, they could use a Xavier Watts next to Antoine Winfield Jr. potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I know they like Christian Izien though.
Is he going to play true safety?
I mean, they kind of has to at this point. Edge rusher would be interesting. Like Yaya Diaby is probably he's their best edge rusher that's signed beyond the next year. Hassan Reddick was brought in, but he's a 1-year rental type of deal. And who knows what version of him you're going to get, given the way last season went. The interior, you've got Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey, who would be entrenched as, significant contributors there. But I think edge rusher, like they brought back Anthony Nelson as well, so he's part of that, and Chris Braswell, and they've got some depth players. But like if one of these guys, Braden Swinson or Jack Sawyer, or one of those guys was the pick, I think that would make sense.
Swinson's an interesting one. They did that in the second round with Braswell last year. The other position's guard. I mean, if they want to upgrade at left guard, Ben Bredesen there. But I don't know where the value is. Again, I think this is where I think teams are looking and they think, I can pick a starter in round 2 or 3 at that position. And they, some of these guys might get bumped up the board a little bit.
I really like Swinson with this pick. I think he could be a lot of
other guards that I love.
I think Swinson could be the day one, third pass rusher that they have and look to replace Reddick going forward.
But they had Braswell in the second round last year.
Yeah, they have a lot of young guys, but again, would any of them stop you taking a guy for value at pick number 53 who you thought, could be a day one contributor as a defensive line rotation?
Yeah, I'm good with that. That's fine. Let's go Braden Swinson. Edge depth here for the Bucks. Braden Swinson from LSU. Packers on the clock here now at pick 54. They went wide receiver in the first round. Matthew Golden. I could see Packers fans right now. We have not drafted a first round receiver since 2002. Well, the Eagles had not drafted a first round cornerback since 2002 until they did last year. So sometimes trends break. They change. Trends change.
Yeah.
So the Packers took a first rounder. By the way, this is Eric Edholm's first round mock draft. Using that as a base, and Matthew Golden was the first round pick for the Packers. Where do you want to go here for Green Bay? Trey Amos. Yeah.
Another team. I mean, they could definitely use corner. They're weird because they've got a ton of guys. Their defense feels like the inverse of Buffalo's wide receiver room, where everybody belongs in the slot. Like Nate Hobbs, Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, like Keyshawn Nixon. All these players feel like they actually are better slot defenders than they are outside perimeter corners. And yet someone's going to need to play outside perimeter corner at this point, which is probably going to be Nate Hobbs. I would love if they had one more outside corner. And that's, by the way, Jair Alexander may be on the trade block, and who knows if he's going to even be
gone,
there.
Yeah. I'm expecting him to be all but gone. I think Amos is the play here. I know Evan Williams is a safety before somebody jumps in and says that. Yes.
But
they have a lot of players who could step in and cover the slot is the point. Yes.
Including, Evan Williams has played, is a safety that's lined up in the slot as one of those sort of hybrid defenders, or a safety that covers tight ends and backs from a slot alignment. My point being, everyone plays in that like joker role within that defense. The one outside corner they have is Jair Alexander, who might be on the trade block.
I think Amos is the pick here. Yeah. I could see him going much higher. This is what's crazy about the draft, right? He's been a fringe first rounder, and I'm not saying we're doing it the right way, but like we've been pretty logical all the way through here, and some team needs and various things. This is where Amos is falling right here. Nice career across 3 different schools. Trey Amos going to the Packers here.
Yeah.
Do you want to reset, or do you want to just crank through this and we'll reset at the end? Up against it for Ben here.
Where did we
Closing in
get
on
to
2
when we
hours.
last reset?
I don't remember. It's not as clean when you're doing the second round. I think through the Jets. No. Yeah, through the Jets at pick 42. So picks 43 through 54.
All right.
We'd be resetting.
43, the 49ers picked Alfred Collins, defensive tackle from Texas. 44, the Dallas Cowboys picked Nick Scouton, the edge rusher from Texas A&M. 45, the Colts picked Carson Schwessinger, the linebacker from UCLA. 46, the Falcons picked Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss. 47, the Cardinals picked wide receiver Jalen Noel from Iowa State. 48, the Miami Dolphins got Donovan Jackson, the tackle/guard from Ohio State. 49, the Bengals grabbed Tate Rutledge, the guard from Georgia. 50, the Seahawks grabbed Jaden Higgins, wide receiver from Iowa State. 51, the Denver Broncos got running back Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State. 52, the Seattle Seahawks grabbed Jared Wilson, center from Georgia. 53, the Bucs just grabbed Braden Swinson, edge rusher from LSU. And then 54, the Green Bay Packers just grabbed cornerback Trey Amos from Ole Miss.
All right, well done. Appreciate it. Chargers now on the clock. Their first time around, they went edge rusher Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. So they filled a pretty big need on the edge with round 1. Still have the wide receiver look, the tight end look, more defensive line depth, a couple different ways that the Chargers could go here. We should at least discuss these receivers. Is there anybody worth taking here to slot in opposite Ladd McConkey?
I mean, there definitely is, right? Like this is perfect for the Chargers. They don't go with one of these positions. Their 3 biggest needs, you could argue, are like, well, not so much running back now. They grabbed Najee Harris in free agency, but wide receiver, tight end are still immediate day one starters for them if they get the right guy.
Is this Jalen Royals' spot?
Dude, Royals would be good here.
I would take Royals over Ao Maynor, Bash, some of the other wide receiver, Trey Harris. I would take Royals ahead. You and I would both take Royals over those next few players.
Yeah, I love Royals. I would be really interested in Trey Harris at this spot as well. I think that would be fascinating. But and any of the tight ends, I think, are in range at this point as well.
Yeah, I'm not trying. So the tight end options would be Elijah Arroyo, more of the speed type of tight end. Mason Taylor, dependable, solid. Terrence Ferguson. Harold Fannin reminded me of former Charger. Is he still there now? Gerald Everett. Is he back there? Losing track of where Gerald Everett is. Reminds me a little bit of Gerald Everett as a, I think pretty athletic, receiving tight end with some, move tight end capabilities. So I'd probably lean receiver here over tight end, but that's how I've been living my life here, anti-tight end recently.
Yeah, apparently. Honestly, any of the right wide receivers I like at this spot, but the 2 that I would be choosing between, I think, would be Royals and Trey Harris from Ole Miss.
Harris, even though it's tough to not call him a deep threat because that's how he was used at Ole Miss, even though he's a 4.5 guy, but he's more of a size outside player. I think Royals polish as a route runner next to McConkey is the way to go here. There's a reason why you and I ranked him higher than Trey Harris. I think there's a little more risk with Harris's game. I would love to get I'd love to get Royals in his route running here to go with Ladd McConkey. They brought back Mike Williams. They still have Quentin Johnston. I think Royals could be the right option here.
Yep, let's do it.
He's your wide receiver 4.
Yes.
Right? So Jalen Royals. Go check out our receiver rankings. We had a good discussion for quite a while. Jalen Royals going to the Chargers here. Now the Bills, they're one of the more interesting teams in the second round because they have 2 picks here. They have 56 and then they have 62. Their first pick, they went corner, Azariah Thomas. I love that actually for the Bills. Maybe the best press man corner in the draft. Are they a double up on the defensive line? Even though they've added a lot of depth there this offseason, could they double up on the defensive line with these next few picks? Tyleek Williams, big body, nose. TJ Sanders, undersized. Pass rusher. I think Tyleek Williams would be a really nice fit here for the Bills.
Yeah, people have been projecting them to get Kenneth Grant in the first round a lot in part because of the big body nose tackle style of, you need someone like that next to Ed Oliver. Tyler Williams, I think, is a very different player, but fits the same need in terms. So I'd love that at 56.
So the other thing that's potentially in play, Deion Walker, the defensive tackle out of Kentucky, he's way down on the consensus board now because he played with a broken back, which is either chronic or like kudos, you played through it, you played through injury. But he's now down at 76 on the consensus board. I think there was a point last year where Tavondre Sweat dropped way down on the consensus board because of a DUI before the draft, and then he went early in the second round last year. Deion Walker's low on boards now, but I could see him being much higher and in play in the second round. So I just want to throw his name out there. I don't know. Where is he? 106 now on the PFF board, 76 on the consensus board. I think he's in play in the second round for these teams looking for defensive tackles. I'm not saying do it, but I'm just throwing the name out there.
Has he ever been particularly good?
2023, he was pretty good, yeah.
Pretty good, though. Like,
that's a lot of snaps, 700 plus snaps, moves extremely well for his size. Again, my issue on the tape is pad level, holding the point against the run, but he's got some freak plays in there as well. So it's a bit of a potential play. And there's I'll just say this, there's way worse 330 pounders that have been drafted pretty high in the first 3 rounds over the last couple of years.
The weird thing about him is that I don't understand why he did any workout stuff whatsoever if he's still dealing with this back injury stuff. Like, either if it's completely healed and resolved, then his workouts are a problem. If it isn't, then the injury is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's risk here. I'm just saying there's also an upside play for a team that that has 2 picks that might want to play that game. So we keep saying defensive line for Buffalo, when I also think they're rolling 8 deep heading into the season. So they only have 1 year of Joey Bosa, 1 year of Daquan Jones. It's a bit of a developmental and long-term play, and continuing to add depth at a position that teams love to have depth at, obviously.
I think Tyler Williams could come in and be like, depends how you term starter, but like a significant part of that defensive line right away, which again, in this crossover area of now you're drafting for depth and backups in the future, I think that makes a ton of sense here.
Yeah, I like it.
Done.
Tyleek puts the Panthers up on the clock at 57. They took Michael Williams at pick 8, edge rusher out of Georgia, with their first pick. They're another team that could easily double up on the defensive line. But now when you look at what they've added this offseason, there's a lot of bodies that they've added. 4 pretty significant adds when you add Michael Williams to the mix here.
Yeah. So, but, and then they have the question at wide receiver, given what's a kind of interesting group with the unknown of what Xavier Legette is going to become, right? Did not have a good rookie season whatsoever. Was one of those picks that a lot of people were leery about as a high draft pick in the first place, late 5th-year breakout. Now, there were some fairly excusable reasons for that. If you look into a story, it's not like he was, this is the problem with those data points, right? Is that sometimes there are, I think, very fair reasons why a guy didn't break out until late in his career. But if he doesn't work out, he's just still in the bucket of late breakout, right? But are you already kind of writing Xavier Legette off as what can he become going forward? Because if you are, Jalen Coker is a really nice number 2. Adam Thielen is getting on and needs to be replaced at some point anyway, but is useful there as well. Like, you're missing that number 1 guy, right? On the other hand, if you think Xavier Legette can become that, or even a version of, the DK Metcalf number 1, the sort of relatively one-dimensional, limited, deep threat slant type of guy, maybe you don't need the receiving weapons.
Yeah, I would say you're not giving up on Xavier Legette, but you still need a receiver, right? You still have need there because Thielen is older and 1 year remaining. And, Coker was maybe, great find last year, but I think receivers still in play here. Receivers in play. I think linebacker is potentially in play because they've already added so much on the defensive line. I would still love to add more, but starting linebacker next to Josie Jewell isn't great. Trevin Wallace, last year's 3rd round pick. If you believe in him, maybe he's fine. And then maybe safety next to Trayvon Merrick. Maybe this is a Xavier Watts type of play. It's not going to feel great with, the defensive line need that the Panthers, still might have, or the receiver need, but he could probably step in and start next to Merrick.
I think either in terms of skill set and sort of fit, I love Trey Harris here, but also Ayo Manor, the Stanford wide receiver, would be an interesting combination as well. Like Trey Harris gives you, ironically, but Trey Harris gives you kind of Xavier Legette insurance, but also can coexist with him if Legette does jump forward and show out.
We both had you had Besh just ahead of Trey Harris. I had Harris just ahead of Besh, but we both had him pretty high. We had both of those guys ahead of Ayo Maynor. We're now at the receiving point where, again, our evaluations aren't perfect, but we seem to think, I think Ayo Maynor's raw, needs development. That's tricky with Legette, who's got similarities there. Harris has the question coming out of the Ole Miss system and, learning a few more routes than what he's already run. So there's a lot of questions here. Besh adds some physicality to the receiving core if that's what you're looking for. But
Besh, I think, is a better immediate. He's a better immediate impact player, but there's less contingency in him if Legette doesn't develop. Whereas what I like about Harris is I think that's better Legette insurance, in addition to potentially being a contributor right away. There's
also Dave Canales he's worked with DK Metcalf, and he's done a pretty nice job developing receivers through the years. Maybe that's where you want to put more of a project like Ayo Maynor. And I think the consensus is going to be a little bit higher on him than maybe we are. So I'm good with putting him in just for the realism factor.
For the realism, where does the consensus have him? I don't think it's that high on him, is it?
Yeah, I think it is. We get receivers.
55 for him. He's one spot ahead of Trey Harris on the consensus. They're 55, 56.
Yeah, he's next. He's next on the consensus board as far as receivers. Knoll and Royals were lower on the consensus, and we already took them. So yeah, Ayo Maynor, right. This would feel like right around the spot where he's supposed to go, actually. Yeah.
Right, but my point being Trey Harris is the next pick on the consensus. Like they're 55, 56.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's not a big gap there. We're not doing one a disservice by
I get it.
Consensus.
So pick one.
Trey Harris.
All right. Trey Harris. Ole Miss going to the Carolina Panthers. New weapon for Bryce Young. Puts the Texans up on the clock at pick 58. Just 7 more picks left here in the second round. Will we be done by the 11:30 time? Is that was our goal? Right? 2.5 hours.
The magic cutoff.
We are calibrated to whatever the hard out is.
Houston
Texans took Kelvin Banks.
They got Kelvin Banks Jr. in the first round with
that.
Their first round pick. I think that would be an outstanding result for them at 25. So where do they go at pick number 58?
Another team that's pretty good depth wise. I mean, they could still have a little bit more offensive line help. Are there any other specific acute needs here?
It's not an acute need, but I think they're definitely in the wide receiver market. Obviously, Nico Collins is great. They brought over Christian Kirk in free agency. That sort of 2-3 spot, I think, is definitely in play. Like Jack Besh here would be an awesome upgrade for them.
Even with all the depth that they have there?
Yeah, because Jack Besh jumps at all. Like he immediately becomes wide receiver 2 on this team.
He's not better than Christian Kirk right now.
I think Jack Besh right now is better than Christian Kirk. Also, not only do I think he's better than Christian Kirk, but I think Christian Kirk then becomes not the missing skill set, but becomes a different skill set, that vertical slot, which is what he is anyway. It still coexists with Tank Dell if he comes back healthy. I think that's perfect.
I like Besh, but he's not that good, man.
I mean, neither is Christian Kirk.
I think he is, though. He's better than that. You forget how good Christian Kirk is when he's out there.
No.
Are we assuming Tank Dell's not there, as Drake Holiday suggests here? We're assuming no Tank Dell?
I mean, you don't assume no Tank Dell, but at this point, back-to-back, that was a nasty injury. Like, forget the fact that he's had back-to-back injuries, which is itself concerning for a guy that's 165 pounds. That was the kind of nasty injury that can change careers. I don't know if it will, but I think at this point, for a third-round pick who's 165 pounds, has had back-to-back season-ending injuries, the second of which was was a nasty looking injury that could change the entire outcome of his career. I don't think you can rely on him at this point. If he comes back and he's healthy and he's great, awesome. But I don't think you can now say, we don't want to be taking this wide receiver because Tank Dell's here, and that's some redundancy that creates a logjam. At this point, you have to assume that he's a write-off.
Tez Johnson
comes back healthy, great.
Tez Johnson as his apprentice, then.
The apprentice, small man.
Yeah, Tez Johnson is the apprentice. I don't mind Besh. I just don't know that he's immediately better than Christian Kirk. Go Reds.
Well, even if he isn't, he immediately is better than everybody else on the depth chart, and he's the wide receiver 3. So it works either way, but I think he probably is.
Jack Besh fan. I'm good with doing that, but maybe for different reasons. All right, Jack Besh to the Texans at 58. Ravens are on the clock at pick 59 here. They took Josh Simmons, the tackle out of Ohio State, at pick 27. I know Edholm, who did this first-round mock, cited, hey, the Ravens have bought low, essentially, on previously injured players historically, so not a crazy pick there to bring in Simmons. So where could the Ravens go here? Pick 59.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, the Simmons pick. On the one hand, I like it in terms of process. On the other hand, it's the one sort of offensive line pick with the least flexibility to it.
I agree. I don't love that. He's like Fashanu last year, where Fashanu felt like just a left tackle, right? Yeah. I wouldn't even want to mess with him. He's so good at just footwork at left tackle. I don't want to mess with him at right tackle.
Right.
Simmons, not that he's just a left tackle, but he's far more tackle than guard compared to some others.
Yeah, he's definitely the one. Well, not the one. He's definitely the most specific tackle in that first round conversation. And yet you just re-signed Ronnie Stanley. Roger Rosengarten looked pretty good last year as a rookie. It's tough to find a starting spot for him. Now, backup tackle has value, but on the other hand, you could theoretically upgrade either of the guard spots immediately.
So, another team, Baltimore, maybe right guard, they could use both guard spots. They could use an upgrade potentially, or at least competition. Defensive line depth, like any team, maybe the big body up front. Travis Jones heads into the last year of his deal, but not a ton of specific needs. Cornerback could be another interesting one. Nate Wiggins, first rounder last year. They brought in Chidobe Awuzie as a buy low just recently in the last couple of weeks. TJ Tampa was a 4th round pick last year, and Marlon Humphreys there as a slot inside-outside hybrid. This could be another corner depth.
They have that fascinating flexibility with Humphrey and Kyle Hamilton, right? Each one of those guys can play the slot. Humphrey can also play outside. Hamilton can also play deep as a safety. So you have, they can grab a corner, and it doesn't matter if he's a slot or an outside guy, because they can make that fit with moving those pieces around however they want to do it. Awuzie, comes in and means they don't have to chase that, but they can still grab that guy for the future.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, buddy.
Daddy, your card.
I
actually made you a card too.
He's got a card for me. Darian Porter is next on the consensus board and the PFF board. He's at 59 on the consensus. That'd be pretty good value here. Big, long upside play here, maybe for the
I like that move a lot. Big, long upside play, freaky athlete, incredibly small sample size, the perfect kind of gamble for, low-ish in the second round, particularly when you've already, Awuzie means he doesn't need to be good right away.
Do you want to hear one last pitch from Drake Holiday before you press the button? He is begging for TJ Sanders as an interior pass rusher. Begging. He feels, I hate doing the scheme thing. He feels small for what the Ravens generally like. He feels undersized for them.
I mean, the Ravens are the type of team where any single defensive lineman of any description would never surprise me. At any pick.
Yeah. I'm good with Porter. We've got some same school scouting going on here because he went to Iowa State. That's what they did last year.
Then 7 games as a starter and then a freaky athlete.
Yes. Where is it? Porter to the Ravens. Lions are up on the clock. They took Gray Zabel, the guard out of North Dakota State, with their first pick.
Love that pick.
Yes. So defensive line depth could always be. Maybe this is TJ Sanders for the Lions. Interior pass rusher here for Detroit. Sorry, Drake.
Well, they brought back, so they got DJ Reader. They brought Elim McNeil. They brought back Levi Onwuzurike. So The interior is in a pretty good spot, but they still have that like edge rusher spot opposite Aiden Hutchinson that they would love to get an upgrade at.
I think people are still sleeping on Jack Sawyer because he's not going to be the athletic testing freak as some others, but his production is fantastic. Just wins.
Yeah.
I think he's challenging for a starting spot opposite Aiden Hutchinson if he comes in. I like Sawyer. I like him better than JTT as well. Tuimalau, his teammate at Ohio State. What?
This is good pronunciation.
I said it confidently, whether it's right or wrong.
It's true. He did. No one can tell.
Right? That's why I convinced you. I like Jack Sawyer as an option here.
I think that makes sense. I mean, you're not, again, this is a really good roster. It's tough to find too many other spots they would attack. Interior offensive line for depth and contingency. Mahogany's scheduled to start at right guard. They brought in Gray Zabel in the first round, but like Graham Glasgow, I think at some point they're going to be moving on from. Maybe they would double up on the interior of the offensive line, but no, I think this is the biggest need is that second edge rusher spot.
Press the button.
Done.
Jack Sawyer to the Lions. It puts the Commanders up on the clock at pick 61. They went Landon Jackson, the edge rusher out of Arkansas, in the first round. Another team, they could double up on the defensive line. They could be in play for running back here. This could be the Caleb Johnson spot. By the way, if you want to get our running back takes, this Wednesday, running back rankings here on Check the Mic. I don't know if we're going to do tight ends this week. Ben, just telling you on air here. I don't know about tight end rankings just yet. Thursday's show, TBD, but Wednesday, we'll drop our running back rankings here.
Huh. It's because you hate tight ends?
I don't know if they deserve their own show, to be honest.
Wow. You are such a douchebag when it comes to tight ends.
What? I mean, show me the good ones.
All of them.
I'd rather rank defensive line.
God,
better
what
players.
A hater.
Are the Commanders looking potentially running back here? As I was just saying?
I mean, potentially. I like Brian Robinson. I like Austin Eckler. I think their running back room's fine. It's not, you could upgrade on it, but I'm not sure I'd chase this high for running backs. Their offensive line could use depth, even with Laramie Tunsil coming in. Sam Cosme's really good at right guard. Like 3/5 of that line, I think, are in very good shape. The other 2/5 question marks. So you could definitely go either tackle or guard for them. Would make some sense, but again, don't need to chase it.
Ursery still on the board here?
Yeah.
We could get Coleman. We can have him compete with Wiley. Coleman back into guard, competing with Allegretti. And now you're talking depth, man.
Oh, I like that.
Now you got depth. You got competition at 2 starting spots.
Plus, now the logo is basically the same, but upside down.
It's a huge win. That's why you draft an Ursery.
Just flip the decal back.
Arante Ursery from Minnesota going to the Washington Commanders at 61. We locking it in?
Yeah, I like it. I like that one. I like that.
So this could feel like the Roger Rosengarten pick last year for the Ravens. Second round, stepped in as the starting right tackle. Not immediately, but eventually during the season and held his own. I think Ursery could do something similar for Washington. Puts the Bills back up on the clock with their third pick in the first 2 rounds. They just took Tyleik Williams with their first second rounder, and they took Azariah Thomas, the cornerback out of Florida State, in the first round. What are we doing for everything? Everything is a depth pick here for the Bills.
So the Bills are all of a sudden, what if they were in the running back market with the James Cook contract kind of at an impasse at the moment? I mean, Ray Davis, is he the future there if they move on from James Cook, or would they look for one more body to that room? Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, they could be. And if they were trying to be like they do, if they were trying to be shrewd and say, that's fine, we'll let you walk James Cook. I think the NFL is less likely to let the good running back walk these days. They just don't want to. But also, if the market's been jacked up by Saquon and McCaffrey over the last couple of years.
Here's the position they need to be targeting. Safety. Yeah. Xavier Watts, Andrew Makuba, Kevin Winston Jr. Like, these are the guys. Any of those guys could potentially come in and start, or at least compete to start pretty quickly. I
also agree with that. Kevin Winston's coming off of his injury. He got hurt in week 2, but extremely productive. High PFF grades when he was out there previously. Xavier Watts. I like Watts quite a bit. as he's not the best athlete in the world. The guy he's got that ball magnet ability, right? Not just because he had a bunch of interceptions, but he's always in the right place at the right time. I think he can cover tight ends a little bit as well. So he's got some versatility. I think in Makuba, there's some huge Makuba fans, and he's had a very productive career across Clemson and Texas. I think any of those guys very much in play here. Winston's got the most risk attached to him just because he's coming off the injury. I'm good with a guy like Watts, though, with his free safety skills.
Yeah, any of those guys, I think, make a ton of sense. The Bills safety group, they brought back DeMar Hamlin. You know, he's okay. He's good, not great. He's a solid starter. Taylor Rapp is in the same kind of bucket. Cole Bishop, who they drafted recently. None of those guys would stop you drafting somebody that you thought could come in and be a day one starter at safety. The consensus board has Xavier Watts at 49. So this would represent a steal at this point. Relative to the consensus board, it's got Makuba at 83 and then Winston Jr. at 94. So yeah, Watts at this point, 62 when he's 49 on the big board. Consensus big board, steal.
Let's do it. Xavier Watts. That gives the Bills 3 defensive players here.
Love it.
Azariah Thomas at corner, Tyleek Williams at defensive tackle, and Xavier Watts at safety with their 3 picks. Puts the Chiefs up on the board at pick 63. They traded up for Derek Harmon in the first round. I don't think they gave up their second, so we're not, out of our league here. But they got Derek Harmon as an interior pass rusher at 26. They traded up a few spots in Eric Edholm's first round mock draft they were using as a foundation here. What are your thoughts on the Chiefs here? Offensive line available here?
Yeah, so, a lot of people put them in that developmental offensive tackle market because they brought over Jalen Moore to be the solution at left tackle. I think even if Moore works out, a developmental tackle makes some sense because it gives you some flexibility when it comes to Juwan Taylor's deal on the other side. Guard, I think, is an option because Kingsley Suamatea played 1 game there at dead rubber at the end of the season. Mike Caliendo was bad there when he was playing, when Joe Thuney was kicked out to tackle. So, again, if you had either competition or a starter there, I don't think that would be a bad solution for them. Are they in the running back world? Elijah Mitchell, Kareem Hunt, Isaiah Pacheco, Carson Steele, or any of those guys? Are any of those guys doing...
No, they're not doing anything for me, but they opted into bringing all of them back. I think they needed to make moves to bring Hunt and Elijah Mitchell in or back.
Sure. I'm just, does any of those guys belong at the top of a depth chart?
No, I get it. I just don't think they're going to go running back here because of the moves that they made to bring them in. I want to talk offensive line for a second here, though, because I think the next few tackles on the consensus board, Cameron Williams from Texas, Wyatt Milam from West Virginia, who many people have as a guard, Emory Jones from LSU, and Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College. They are all developmental type of players. I think Ozzie is the best player of that group. Charles Grant, I know Renner absolutely loves.
Yeah.
William and Mary.
So I was going to bring up.
And then Anthony Belton from NC State. When you're talking about developmental tackle, he's got the size, pretty good athleticism, and actually improved play throughout his career. Had a pretty nice little Senior Bowl as well. So I like some of the lower ranked tackles compared to consensus and some of the boards we're looking at here.
A lot of people love Milam, the West Virginia tackle / guard.
I do too, and think he could play guard. And Renner made the point too. He struggled at the Senior Bowl, but his colleague Kyle Long said, "Hey, I kind of saw that in me, Kyle Long, trying a little bit too hard during that week. I think he's a better player on film." Kyle Long saying,
"Yeah, like if you grabbed Milam to play left guard, that would be amazing. Or you could grab Charles Grant as your developmental tackle, future right tackle / contingency if Jalen Moore isn't a good signing in free agency. I would pick between those 2 guys."
Milam, I think, he might be stuck at guard because of the arm length thing. I got to double check on that. This is a little bit of banking on our friend Mike Renner's, or just emphasizing some of his takes here.
But that's fine because either one of they could use a tackle or a guard. Like the flexibility to be either is great, but if you only got one, they have a spot, right? Like if Milam is the left guard right now, that's great because Kingsley Suamataia is a question mark, Mike Caliendo is probably not a starter, so that's fine. Or if Charles Grant is, just a tackle, your developmental tackle, you can choose between left and right tackle depending on whether Jalen Moore works out. But either way, you need a tackle. So I think they need both a guard and a tackle at some point.
Let's go Grant here. I think he has the potential to be both, and we're our friend Michael Renner banking on his projection here for Grant. He'll love this pick.
He will. Love it.
Doing it for Mike. All right, Eagles are on the clock. Last pick of the second round, pick 64. They traded up to get Malachi Starks, the Georgia safety, at pick 24. Now, this has to be the TJ Sanders spot, or at least some sort of defensive lineman. I have the Eagles pegged for like stealing a first round defensive lineman that everybody's going to think is great, and maybe doubling up with their first two picks. I'm not saying they'll never trade up for a safety, but given their roster construction, it does feel like it's going to be a D line for them to replenish. So the fact that they didn't the first time around, I think I want to do that for them.
Yeah, top players on the consensus board. Obviously, we still got Jalen Milroe there at 46. Then it is the Ohio State edge rushers. Do we pick Sawyer? Yeah, we did pick Sawyer. So
we took Sawyer. JTT still there.
Iomanor, the Stanford wide receiver.
Arizona.
When we get into the tight ends that you hate.
All the tight ends. They do have a tight end need. I think there's an expectation that Dallas Goedert's not staying there for a while, or maybe not going to be around.
Yeah, like a succession plan.
Yeah, I mean, with Philly, maybe even before the season that he's out is what the rumors are that are circulating. I just think for a team that's lost Josh Sweat, lost Milton Williams, not that the cupboard's bare, but they always drafted a year earlier, right? They always made sure that they had Jordan Davis and had Jalen Carter, succession plans. I know Moro Ojomo is there. He's fantastic. But Nolan Smith, Jalix Hunt, it's not bare.
Right.
But, they could always use more. And I don't know
if they were able to...
sorry, really quick. I don't know if defensive tackle is necessarily the play, but it did feel like defensive line was going to be, targeted from them.
I mean, if they were able to grab a defensive lineman here and then circle back for a tight end later in this draft, one of the tight ends that you hate, this would be perfect.
Yeah. I think I like that. We could go JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. Jared Ivey from Mississippi.
It's legitimately the top two guys on the PFF board. It's CJ Sanders or JTT.
My only thing with defense, I know they just lost Milton Williams, who is effectively a defensive tackle. They have a spot for that type of player.
Yeah.
But would you rather have an edge instead of Sanders? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you would rather probably the edge, but I think Sanders would be higher on your horizontal board rankings. So it's weighing those two things, right?
Yeah, I'm good with Sanders here. There's your Milton Williams replacement, TJ Sanders from South Carolina. How he did it again.
Jomo fans gonna be big mad.
There it is. Second round. Done. 7 minutes to spare. 7 minutes to spare.
They only show you the first round.
Do they not have the graphic for round 2?
No.
Oh, really? It's unfortunate.
Write it in the suggestions, the feedback.
I will. I'll send in some feedback. So there it is, round 2. It's all a thought exercise. We're all having fun here. Just to remind, we had a request. I'm just throwing this out. Do we want to have a bonus show tomorrow? Round 3. Tomorrow we just dropped round 3. Yeah. Like, what else are you doing on a Tuesday? What else are you doing, Sam?
Grinding running back tape for the Wednesday show.
That's true. We are watching running back tape. So Wednesday, or we could do round 3 on Wednesday. Running backs on Thursday.
No, because we should do the team needs show.
Oh, you want to do that Thursday?
Yeah.
Reset team needs. We stay tuned. If I could talk Sam into it, we'll do a round 3 bonus show. We'll see. We'll see how we do. Running backs coming up on Wednesday, though. This is our round 2 mock. It was all based off Eric Edholm's first round mock draft. and we did round 2. Also, I've mentioned the last couple shows, I'm doing a class, SMWW, Sports Management Worldwide, teaching a class on football analytics and telling stories with data, learning a little bit about PFF grading, and some of the things that I've learned through the years. How to use data to tell stories is how I like to call it, what I like to call it. So smww.com, go check it out if you are interested, starting over the next couple weeks here. Get 8 hours with me, kind of like one-on-one. So it's good times. All right. Anything else here?
No.
We gave Ben 5 minutes off. Get to your next thing. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Wednesday with more Check the Mic.